181. Jugless Juggler has come to rescue Kai again. Gaia Spacetime. Fujimiya, he didn't listen to you at all, Gamu said, watching Jugglers retreating back with a twinge of sympathy. It reminded him of the old Fujimiya. It's natural he wouldn't listen. Fujimiya's lips curved a little. You only reach true understanding by living through things yourself. I was the same back then. I think deep down he still wants to protect others, Gamu added. It had been a brief encounter, but whether on screen or off, Fujimiya believed in Juggler. He saw his younger self in that figure, withdrawn, unkempt, stubbornly refusing to admit defeat. He understood at once, he's competing with someone. Fujimiya's concern, prideful and rare, was sincere. Few people would ever hear it. Gamu listened, and a chill slid through him. I suspect we'll have trouble with the two of us in the future. What do you mean? Why is it that whenever Gaia shows up, he gets beaten, and a ghoul just pretends? Gamu teased. Ha! That's all you. It has nothing to do with a ghoul. Not so fast. You'll end up like me for sure. At least I became the most dazzling presence in this story, Fujimiya shot back, amused. Then Gamu grew serious. Fujimiya, are you really going to do what you said? Fujimiya's smile disappeared. Even if Queen Amaterasu abdicates, she is still the former monarch of Ganonstar. I will not, out of personal anger, bring war down on the people of that world. From every angle, she hardly counts as having come to support Earth, 3 Ultra Warriors aside. But Dr. Psyche is different. An invader stained with the blood of countless innocents. I will not let him live in peace. Zog won't be able to save him, mark my words. At that moment, Juggler was out there, bleeding from his fight and beyond Biwang's treatment. On the other side, Kurenai Guy was walking with Gamu, and almost at once, he mentioned Juggler again. He's my strongest rival and my most helpful friend, always has been. Gamu smiled. There was someone like that in my life too, a similar righteous struggle. Kurenai Guy's smile carried a trace of melancholy. He's probably fighting alone right now. I don't think so. Doesn't he still have you? Gamu said softly. Even if you're apart, the bond remains. Even if he hates you, if you haven't forgotten each other, you'll understand each other someday. Maybe because Gamu and Fujimiya in Gaia Spacetime had been softened beforehand, Gamu then asked something he never had in the original timeline. Kurenai Guy, have you ever thought about a few things? What? Do you truly understand Juggler? Do you know what drives him, what brings him joy or sorrow? Have you ever wondered why he drifted away from you, why your views diverged? 3 questions, blunt and unexpected. Kurenai Guy, taken aback, went quiet. Countless viewers watched, stunned, Gamu and Fujimiya each offering a kind of therapy. The two of them, in relationship and manner, resembled Kurenai and Juggler, similar seniors, not sarcastic, not preachy, stepping in when it matters. People sighed for Juggler. If he had met these kinds of mentors earlier, maybe things would have gone differently. Fujimiya, having arrived much earlier, had been eavesdropping in silence. He stepped forward now. You're as passionate as ever, Gamu. Gamu's surprise was obvious. Fujimiya, when did you get here? Still mischievous as always. Oh right, this is Kurenai Guy, Ultraman Orb. Kurenai bowed clumsily. His demeanor reminded Fujimiya of a younger Gamu, then of Juggler's departing silhouette. Fujimiya glanced away coolly. The old me would have disliked you because you're too righteous. Righteous was a euphemism. Fujimiya meant Kurenai was a single-minded, hot-headed idealist, full of ardor but lacking nuance. Gamu had understood Fujimiya's hang-ups better than anyone and had been able to pull him back from the brink. That made Fujimiya feel more sympathy for Juggler. Meanwhile, Gamu's questions gnawed at Kurenai. In the original timeline, no one had ever asked him those things so directly, not even Juggler. The scene shifted. Under Gamu's search, everyone found Psyche's worship on the moon. Kurenai set off alone, racing there. He fought Beelzebub on the lunar surface, then infiltrated Psyche's base. Dr. Psyche reclined, filing his nails lazily, puzzled why, of all Ultra Warriors, only Orb had shown. Perhaps O50 had set it as a trial, forbidding interference. Psyche only knew the one person who could genuinely stop him, the phantom demon form, was absent. The thought sent a chill through him. Still, Psyche believed he could toy with Kurenai easily. Kurenai, a passionate, reckless fighter, paid for his carelessness. He wasn't so much tricked as he walked straight into the trap himself. An energy snare dropped, and he couldn't transform. Purple currents lanced through his body and spirit as Psyche lectured grandly. Despite poisoning minds and slaughtering innocents, he framed himself as the illuminator of the universe, bringing peace through his way, so he wouldn't become a victim of his own methods. Kurenai's eyes reddened in fury, but he was helpless, raging impotently. I want to make a world without sorrow or strife. No darkness, only light. A cold voice cut through Psyche's speech from behind. A world like that would be utterly boring. A purple flash, and the phantom demon form appeared, sword in hand. Viewers gasped. Juggler had come to save Kurenai again. Hadn't he said he wouldn't help? Only a day had passed since he was badly wounded, and now he was on the moon to rescue Kurenai, who had been captured for barely 5 minutes. Clearly, Juggler had been watching him all along. With one swift stroke, the blade flashed across the air and pressed at Psyche's throat. Juggler, back in human form, had eyes blazing with anger. Whether from seeing Kurenai tormented or because much of his own sorrow tied back to Psyche, he felt no need for words. He struck. Psyche was cut cleanly in half. Viewers cheered. So satisfying. Juggler's one of the few normal people left. Brutal but effective. Kurenai should learn from him. Don't run in all chatty and get ambushed. Kurenai, embarrassed by the flood of comments, scratched his nose. He'd been a fool. It was thanks to Juggler he hadn't died. But celebratory relief turned to alarm when Psyche's body shimmered and spoke on anyway. He'd left a projection behind. Boxer briefs, the projection chanted nonsensically. Then, since you solve problems with violence, I'll fight violence with violence. In 10 seconds, the bomb Shinra left here will blow you all to pieces. Psyche smiled and vanished. The countdown began. Juggler instinctively looked back at the trapped Kurenai. He swung his snake-heart sword at the energy cage. The blade struck and rebounded so forcefully it sent Juggler flying, slamming him into the ground. Alarms shrieked, and the red warning lights spun faster. Kurenai, immobilized and barely able to speak, shouted, "Don't worry about me. Run!" Juggler stared at him. Was Kurenai ordering him to run? The thought flashed through his mind. Then viewers noticed something else. Light returned to Juggler's eyes, and at its center was Kurenai's figure. The look on Juggler's face, reluctant, anxious, unwilling, was heartbreaking. He remembered Miyabi's sacrifice and how powerless he'd felt before. Even if he'd gained strength, was he again to watch Kurenai die? Would fate mock him like this? He gasped and hacked at the trap with everything he had. No words, only action. 5 seconds. Purple electric arcs licked along the sword and across his body, burning him. 3 seconds. I said I won't help you anymore. That had been words of anger. Yet Kurenai had accused him of abandoning him, always misunderstanding him. It infuriated Juggler. He roared, redoubling his efforts, ignoring his wounds to save Kurenai. 2 seconds. Kurenai's eyes widened as he watched his best friend's desperate scream. How many times had Juggler saved him? He couldn't help but feel shame and gratitude. Gamu's questions echoed. Did he really understand Juggler? 1 second. Cracks spidered through the energy trap. The blade cleaved through. The camera pulled back into space. In the silent instant of the explosion, a towering blaze erupted across the moon's surface, blinding and terrible. Countless viewers held their breath. Kurenai Guy would be fine. He was in the guest section. But Juggler. 182. Jugless Juggler has come to Guy's rescue yet again. On a certain asteroid, Daichi, who had watched Juggler endure and resist pressure before, tilted his head and asked, "Juggler, do a lot of Ultra Warriors know him?" X thought for a moment. "No need to mention us," he said. "Personally, I think he's a good teammate. Sarcastic, sure, but unexpectedly reliable." After all, the first time X and Juggler met, Juggler had muted him. Given Juggler's temperament, he probably feared that Headphone Boy's chatter would interfere with his plans. As for the others, X continued, Zero's met him too. Though they're not particularly close, they're both tsundere in their own ways. Geed mentioned him once, said Juggler had grabbed his butt. X trailed off, then smiled. He gives off this evil, lonely vibe at first, but once you get to know him, Juggler is actually very dependable and kind-hearted. Others, X began, but Daichi cut in with a laugh. By now, I think most Ultras know him, especially Orb. They both looked at the screen. In the footage, as the base teetered on the edge of destruction, Juggler finally rescued Guy. Riding on the purple light of the phantom demon form, they descended straight toward Earth. The image mirrored a memory. Once, Guy had used Orb's light to carry Juggler across the galaxy. Now Juggler had somehow gained a similar ability at a cost. Humph, someone muttered online. Brother Juggler? Really? I'm going to cry. He doesn't even care about his own life. He's not just Guy's good brother anymore. He's practically a good father. Playing the nurturer, huh? Maybe that's why Guy became a wandering hero. Viewers cheered as the duo escaped. The purple light vanished, and they landed. Juggler unclasped his arm from around Guy's waist and stood, cool and composed, as if reinstating their usual Cold War distance. Guy, panting, stared at him. "How many times have you saved me now?" he asked. Juggler glanced at him with the ghost of a smile, then put on his indifferent mask. "Who knows?" One of them was clean. The other was covered in dust, old wounds unhealed and new ones opened. A shocked shout cut through the crowd. "Guy!" It belonged to someone familiar. On screen, viewers groaned. Queen Amaterasu had returned to Earth and was entangled with Shohei, right in front of his childhood friend. The queen and her retinue immediately eyed Juggler with suspicion. That distrust stung him deeply. Tachibana, close to Miyabi, looked away, head lowered, hair falling across his face, and quietly slipped away. Guy reached out, wanting to call after him, but the words stuck in his throat. He remembered their earlier conversation. "Juggler, wait! Are you ordering me, Guy?" His hand fell. Tachibana walked off, and Guy turned to discuss Dr. Psyche's situation with Gamu and Fujimiya, who had just arrived. Juggler kept his back to everyone until the gazes thinned, then raised a hand to press against his injured abdomen. He gritted his teeth and left. Out of sight, under an empty bridge, he finally collapsed against the wall. The strength he'd been holding on to drained away. Juggler clutched at the wound, and tears streamed down his face. He had hidden this injury from Guy. Viewers exploded in outrage and heartbreak. "Guy, you idiot! I thought Gamu's talk therapy had worked. Why don't you go after him? Can't you see Brother Juggler's bleeding? He's crying." For many, Guy's coldness only confirmed his reputation for being thoughtless, but he never lost every supporter. Guy always acted. He would go to other planets if he heard a child cry, unlike the Queen, who seemed to thrive on packaging herself and ignoring others' suffering. Guy later corrected his mistakes and became a legendary wandering hero. The Queen, many suspected, had abandoned her homeland, and Shohei. The scene shifted. The Tree of Life had grown violently tall, blotting out the sky. Juggler, badly hurt, watched another Tree of Life rise on Earth and felt numb. If that's how it goes, he thought wryly, he might as well be an Earthling. What made him uneasy, though, was the human military response. They quickly cordoned the area and prepared explosives. Humans saw only an invasive external power and planned to blow it up. Civilians were evacuated in order. Beelzebub descended to stop them, swarming to protect the tree. Sensing hostility, the defense team opened heavy fire. Space demons shrieked. Many Beelzebub were obliterated in the barrage. Juggler and viewers alike raised question marks. These cannon fodder couldn't even stand up to tanks. Ganon Star, capable of interstellar travel, still needed its generals in close combat with a knife. What was its level, really? Then the Queen lost her head again. Seeing Queen leading Beelzebub to defend the tree, she immediately assumed Psyche was coercing him. She forgot Queen had once betrayed and ambushed her, and somehow, on the spot, Queen's words moved her. "I want to make a beautiful new world with Queen," she chanted. She transformed into a war god and went to protect him. The audience could not contain themselves. Even Guy, who had urged humans to halt their assault, was stunned. Online comments poured out. Are the people of Earth watching a skit? Is the Queen's vow worthless? She contradicts herself so easily. No wonder Gamu and Fujimiya hesitated. Who wants to get involved with the Queen? Any Ultra who hangs out with her loses their mind. The defenses the Queen had built up in the audience crumbled. Even Master Gao and Nako were speechless. Before they'd even arrived on Earth, the Queen had pulled off this stunt. Time and again, whenever people thought she'd reached the limit of audacity, she outdid herself. "My home planet is invaded, my people massacred, and I'm too timid to transform into a war god. My online flame is attacked, and I immediately abdicate, using the Tree of Life as an excuse to go and meet them in person. When a demon who killed countless Ganon folk is attacked, she says she was coerced, and then immediately believes him, transforming into a war god and breaking her own solemn vow. Even Queen's act was convincing, so convincing that Psyche too had been deceived. Only the Queen could cause such a collapse. The enemy's goal was the war god. Psyche realized with dawning horror that he hadn't been controlling Queen, he'd been played. Queen tore off her disguise and tried to inject puppet venom into the war god. Orb's orb caliber flashed. The giant stepped forward to shield the war god. But Orb had just debuted and didn't yet have a full command of the transformation's invincible frames. He collided with the poisonous sting, and for the first time, Kurenai Guy felt what Juggler had felt. Even giving your all, it's hard to resist puppet control. The war god, restrained by Quinn, watched as Orb took the blow for her and suddenly erupted with power. For a few moves, Quinn lost ground and ended up looking battered. Viewers began to wonder if the Queen had been swapped out. Orb, doubling over with pain, shot the war god an accusing glance. "So if I don't get hurt, your performance suffers, right?" He didn't voice that complaint aloud. Instead, he watched the Queen charge back into battle against Quinn and into the enemy's trap, and a wave of helpless anger washed over him. Two senior predecessors who disliked Omo stepped forward at that moment. Two sky-piercing shouts rang out. "Guy! Guru!" Boom! The two filial sons of Earth landed perfectly and joined the fight against Queen's army. But at the instant of transformation, Gamu felt a jolt of dread. Oh no. How did I forget how to transform into Supreme? Had the Queen's debuff spread so quickly? Fujimiya was equally stunned. Oh no, does this Earth not welcome Gaia and me? Why is the energy so weak? How am I supposed to show off now? These senior veterans, who had once fought Zog, were secretly alarmed. Behind Orb, a Beelzebub lurched forward, claws flashing for the kill. Juggler, bent under the bridge, saw it, and his eyes widened. Tsk! He forced himself up, aggravating his wound, wincing in pain. Even so, he gritted his teeth and rose to his feet, exhausted but fixed on Orb, the one controlled by puppet venom. Guy's earlier question echoed in his head. Juggler paused, then thought, who knows? Purple light flickered. The phantom demon form surged into the sky and flew once more toward his endangered comrade. The Beelzebub's claws slashed at Orb's back. Clang! The gleam of the snakeheart sword struck with razor speed, cleaving the monster in two, claws and demon both cut down. Heavily wounded, Juggler had once again shielded Guy from death. He stood back to back with Orb. A small lightness touched him. Perhaps the familiarity of their stance, the old days when Guy wasn't yet Orb, before they'd decided to climb the pinnacle of heroes. Back then they'd faced mountains of blades and seas of fire, but somehow they'd been freer, less burdened. Juggler shook off the stray thoughts and swung his sword at the repelled Beelzebub. Guy, he whispered in his heart, I've come to help you again. P.S. It's a shame about B. Wong, Arrogant King, a nickname for Tregear. In recent years, he's mainly been doing stage plays and barely appears in the main story. I remember watching Gaia when I was little. I loved hearing Gamu and Fujimiya shout. I loved the episode where Agul was revived, the scene where Fujimiya roared, begging Earth to grant him power once again. 183. The world line had shifted slightly. Land of Light. Max, do you know Juggler? The boy had been clinging to old Max a lot these days. I've heard of him, Max answered. I heard he even has his own ultra signature. Is that true? It is. But, the boy hesitated. I looked through the Interstellar Alliance's files and found that Juggler is actually a wanted criminal. Many lives have died because of him, but when I watched him in the footage, he didn't seem like that kind of person. Max glanced at him with mild surprise. The kid was unusually studious for an elementary school ultra-hopeful. He's certainly done terrible things, Max admitted. But he's never pretended otherwise. After going through light and darkness, he does what he believes is right. He exists in a gray area. There's no need to whitewash him. The Land of Light accepts him because there's still light in his heart, the guest continued. What's precious is that he can break tradition, transcend the warrior of light in his own way, and become a different kind of light. Those words crossed worlds and reached Juggler in the armory. They struck him. It was true that during the Demon Beast era he had killed innocents, but he had never lied about it. He had accepted the consequences, acted by his own code, and lived in that gray area. The 7 universes had issued warrants for his arrest. On the surface, they hunted him, but secretly they'd hired him as muscle. In the end, he was chaotic good at best, a hedonistic troublemaker who sometimes did the right thing. On the screen, however, a stream of spell-like noise clawed at Orb's mind. Become the queen's puppet. Smile, smile. The price of the shirt is £9.15. Flowers, trees, sky, breeze, clouds, sun. The words rapped and tore at him like a corrosive chant. Crimson flooded Orb's eyes. His fingers clawed at his own flesh as if trying to rip the pain from his soul. Unable to control himself, he began smashing the surrounding buildings. Fortunately, the human side had cleared the area. There were no bystanders. Rumble, whoosh, boom. Juggler, who had just disentangled himself from a Beelzebub, streaked back into the fight. His snake-heart sword flared purple as he struck a correction slash across Orb's face. The blade that could have split a Beelzebub in two left no physical scar on Orb. Instead, it shook his deranged consciousness violently. Suspended in air, Juggler stared into Orb as if looking through the giant's body and meeting Kurenai Gai's eyes. "Kurenai Gai," he shouted hoarsely, a note of accusation and pain in his voice. "Aren't you supposed to protect everyone? You're the chosen warrior of light. You have ideals to uphold, enemies to defeat, and promises to the people you saved." Grief and indignation roared through Juggler. The sword erupted in purple light as he brought it down toward Orb's head. The strike pulled Kurenai Gai back into a memory. Do-do-do. By a dim campfire in the wilderness, a gentle tune drifted. Kurenai Gai sat by the flames as Juggler approached with a smile. "You're awfully relaxed," Juggler teased. "Tomorrow you're ascending the warrior's peak." Kurenai Gai put down his playing and looked toward the peak, then at Juggler. "I'm not relaxed," he said softly. "I just think you're more suited to be an ultra warrior than I am, Juggler." There was a brilliance in his eyes, an unquestioning trust in his best friend. Kurenai Gai genuinely believed Juggler's strength, perhaps even more than Juggler did himself. No wonder Juggler had felt such a fall when the circle of light had turned him away. Even Kurenai Gai had expected Juggler to be the one to gain power. The memory softened Orb's crazed expression for a moment. He bowed his head, stunned. "Believe in yourself," Juggler yelled, gathering himself, then slashed Orb's cheek. "Don't give up, Kurenai Gai." The pain in his best friend's words finally pried some clarity back into Kurenai Gai's mind. He forced his power outward to disintegrate, restraining further damage to the city. In the ruins, still in human form, he writhed under the puppet poison. Tachibana and his two companions piloted a ship close enough to push a life seed into the war goddess's forehead crystal, trying to purge the poison. But the toxin was too deep, or perhaps Quinn's curse was stronger than the life seed, so the seed was repelled. In the next heartbeat, Juggler snatched it out of the air. "This is good," he thought, and rushed to the collapsing Kurenai Gai, the same Kurenai Gai who had once come to save him when he was poisoned. Juggler scooped him up, calling his name over and over. "Kurenai Gai, calm down! Kurenai Gai!" While holding him, Juggler shoved the life seed into Kurenai Gai's mouth. The crimson stain that had covered him began to fade. Kurenai Gai choked, breath returned, and he lay on the ground gasping. Juggler let out a ragged sigh of relief. "How many times has Juggler helped Kurenai Gai now?" Someone on the screen joked. "The third time," another answered. "They say things come in threes, but with this, there'll be more." Breaking a vow, just like the Queen. To many viewers, the uncomplicated brotherhood from the Ultra Brothers to Juggler and Kurenai Gai was deeply moving. But unlike the old bonds, Juggler and Kurenai Gai's ideals had split them. They were distant now, unlikely to return to how they were before ascending the peak. Still, countless fans hoped they could someday reconcile. Now, with Kurenai Gai breathing again, Queen's roar echoed across the battlefield. Juggler looked up and a plan formed in his head. "Kurenai Gai, I'm going to beat it. I'm going to surpass the Warrior of Light." This disaster had started because of Kuin, and the divergence because of it. Even the Ultra Warriors had failed to defeat Kuin, but what if he could do it himself? What if, without the Light's power, and without transforming into an Ultra, he could still prove himself, prove he'd found his own path to power? Juggler simply wanted to be stronger, so Miyabi's death wouldn't be repeated, and those he cared about wouldn't be endangered again. Even if the power was not what he'd once wanted, it would do. He launched himself at Kuin. Kurenai Gai wanted to shout, "Don't go. You're not its match." The words clogged in his throat when a memory surfaced. Gamu's question back then. Do you truly understand, Juggler? Do you know the reasons behind every one of his moves, his joys and sorrows? Have you ever wondered why he drifted away, why your views diverged? Kurenai Guy stared at Juggler's battered back. He was badly hurt, but he still wanted to prove himself, to be strong enough to protect others. Together, Kurenai Guy murmured, and the words reached Juggler. What? Juggler didn't catch it at first as he tore across the battlefield. It's too dangerous. I'll go with you, Kurenai Guy shouted, gritting his teeth as he tried to rise. Juggler froze. So did countless viewers. How had Kurenai Guy, clumsy with words at best, suddenly found the courage to speak plainly? Had Gamu's question opened him up? Kurenai Guy scratched his head later as if embarrassed, trying to downplay it. Juggler snorted, remembering what he'd expected, that Kurenai Guy would deny his own strength and once again fail to understand him. Instead, he heard what he needed to hear. A strange, unprecedented joy swelled in Juggler's chest. Seeing Kurenai Guy, newly recovered and barely able to stand, he still barked at him in typical fashion. Take care of yourself. Don't underestimate me. Then Juggler shifted into his demon form and sped toward Queen, leaving Kurenai Guy behind, but not without a trace of warmth. Kurenai Guy felt it. Beneath those cold words, there had been a hint of a smile. Gaia Spacetime. It seems our interference nudged the future a little, Gamu said. Yes, at least Kurenai Guy made a change, Fujimiya replied, smiling. They both relaxed for a beat, then their smiles twisted into awkward, resentful grins. Damn it! Why had Gaia and Agul been taken out by 2 fireballs so quickly? We could at least withstand Zog's attacks. It seemed the futures they could alter had limits. Some things, perhaps the Queen's aura among them, still tugged at the world line no matter what they tried. Juggler charged at Quinn alone. Years of anger and restraint crystallized into raw force. In 2 brutal slashes, he felled Queen, leaving her unable to rise. The crowd erupted in cheers. Relief at last. Juggler had poured everything into the fight and had just dealt the single greatest damage yet. But he was hurt, and 2 fists could not stand against 4 hands. From behind, Beelzebubs ambushed him and rained down fireballs. Juggler vanished in the explosion. Juggler! Kai watched, eyes bloodshot with rage. Kuin, however, had one last trick. She seized control of Dr. Psyche, merged with him, and transformed into the fusion Choju, Psyche Queen. 4 monsters marched beneath that single will, intent on destroying the Tree of Life and spreading their puppet poison across the universe. Just then, Asuka and Musashi, gone for so long they felt like myths, finally arrived on Earth, cutting it close for the final battle. A team fight was about to begin. Kai stood beside his 4 seniors, and in a voice that seemed part of his very DNA, finally spoke the words that accompanied him forever. Please lend me your power. Orb, for the first time he called the warrior's name to transform. Was this where the Det King was born? The other 4 raised their transformation devices in unison. Among the shouts, 2 roars rang out especially loud, making hearts pound. Gaia! Agul! Those cries declared something simple. Gamu and Fujimiya hadn't changed. Fame and time might have softened them, but their passion and will to protect burned as fiercely as ever. They were still the 2 youths who had once fought Zog. Everyone glanced at one another, surprised. Gamu and Fujimiya looked composed, but they were always the loudest when they transformed. Chaos erupted. Orb charged the controlled war god. Gaia and Agul confronted Psyche Queen together. Dinah fought 2-on-1, first repelling Gomez, then switching to strong type to punch and explode a Beelzebub. Cosmos, Master Gao, remained in Luna form, negotiating pacification with the Choju Baki Shim. Director Ai and the Yabo aliens began to doubt what they were witnessing. On another front, Shinra wounded a Beelzebub. A figure in a black trench coat swept past him like a gust of wind and drove straight for Psyche Quinn, still locked with Gaia. It's Juggler! He's okay! He's still fighting! How does Brother Juggler keep transforming, getting beaten back to human form, and transforming again? If only he could giantize, he wouldn't be in this position. Seeing Juggler throw himself back into the fray inspired exclamations from the crowd. This was the true war god. The war god that Queen Amaterasu had become earlier felt like a pale imitation. A blade pierced Psyche Quinn's head, only it was like a toothpick against such a massive form. Still, as soon as Juggler landed his hit, he was hurled off and slammed into the ruins, reduced to human form again. This time he was too weak to rise. Sympathy rippled through the audience. "Just lie down and rest," people cried. Even the ultra warriors from the Land of Light were moved. In his short time on Earth, Juggler had never spared himself, always charging wherever the battle needed him. Even when outmatched, he pushed forward. That kind of spirit earned respect. "Juggler!" Shinra shouted, worried. Juggler, dust-covered, looked up to see the ground shuddering, another Beelzebub bearing down on him. He could barely stand. A streak of light cut through the air and destroyed the Beelzebub with a single strike. It was Orb. Kai had kept an eye on Juggler through the fight, even while tangled with the war god. Though still young, he intervened and saved his comrade. Juggler looked at Orb and smiled almost instinctively. The smile froze and turned complex, part pride, part pain. He wanted to laugh and cry at once. Kai had saved him. That should have been a moment of pure gratitude. Instead, Juggler realized just how far Kai had come. Kai's growth seemed effortless beside Juggler's lifelong struggle. After everything, he still couldn't gain enough power. In the end, was he no different from the Juggler who had once watched Kai gain Orb's power? His lips trembled. He understood, painfully. He and Kai could never go back to how things were. "Is there some kind of curse on this Earth?" Zero muttered from his vantage in the four-dimensional sewer, unsure how to even measure the battle. The fight continued in fits and starts. The war god was saved once more by the Seed of Life. If the tree had a consciousness, it would be numb from so much interference. The five warriors combined their attacks and blasted Psyche Queen to pieces. Dr. Psyche himself was frantically rescued by his small robot as his fusion exploded. Everyone converged. Kai refuted Dr. Psyche's earlier verbal attacks, but the old man clung to his beloved machine and wept. Fujimiya glanced at them, and the Gaia bracelet appeared in his hand like a living thing. Then, in a moment that stunned the world, Queen Amaterasu ran forward. She knelt beside the crying Dr. Psyche, placed a hand on his shoulder, and spoke gently. "It is difficult, perhaps impossible, to achieve a world without conflict in this universe. But if we never give up, we will get there someday." Psyche looked up and, comforted by her words, smiled. Past grievances seemed to dissolve between them. On screen, thousands of viewers erupted in disbelief and fury. Queen Amaterasu forgiving the villain? Some reactions scrolled like wildfire. "Queen Amaterasu, are you out of your mind? Even though so many of my people were killed by him, his intentions were good. Let's forgive him?" The villain's robot assistant died. So tragic. As for all the Ganon Star citizens who died, who are they? I don't know them. Does Miyabi know the queen she swore to protect is like this? No wonder Ganon Star fell. The queen wouldn't become the war god to defend her country. Was she the real traitor all along? Even those who had lived through the invasion could not hold back their curses. From the grave of General Raiju, who had died 1,000 years ago, 2 wisps of smoke might as well have formed the word idiot. Elsewhere, Princess Emerana, no stranger to fury, was incensed. As royalty who had fought to the last, she could not accept unconditional forgiveness for atrocities. Mirror Knight beside her shook his head. The audience, whether angry or bewildered, lamented that the queen still lived, though she had abdicated, at least. Inside the battlefield, Kai stood almost paralyzed. Asuka pursed his lips and frowned. Musashi squinted, unable to see why Dr. Psyche deserved enlightenment. Gamu's expression went tight. Fujimiya slowly raised his hand. The Gaia bracelet flared. A cold sound sliced the stunned silence, the abrupt, clean noise of something tearing flesh. A blue blade pierced Dr. Psyche's chest. Its name flashed in truth and light, the Agul blade. "Ugh, Psyche's pupils shrank to pinpoints. He turned, disbelief frozen on his face as he met Fujimiya's cold, unyielding gaze. A gurgle of blood bubbled out as he whispered, "Why?" Fujimiya said nothing. He withdrew the light blade. Where metal had passed, shattered flesh could not hold. Life drained from Psyche's eyes. Gamu turned, sighed, and looked helpless, but inwardly thought, good riddance. This had been Fujimiya's plan all along. In another timeline, the two had watched a screen and seen how the queen's foolish mercy had played out. They agreed that if things ever reached this point, Fujimiya would act. He would not let Gamu be the one to become the villain. "I said I forgave him." He admitted his mistakes. "How could you?" Queen Amaterasu stammered, shocked and at a loss. Fujimiya cast her a cold glance. This is Earth. He invaded this planet. As Earth's guardian, what's wrong with me killing him? Your forgiveness is your own business. I'm simply dealing with an invader from my standpoint. But the queen started to protest. Fujimiya cut her off sharply. Look at your expression. Look at the way you look at those deaths. The people of Ganon Star are living beings, flesh and blood. As a queen, can you not tell the difference? Can a murderer, when defeated, claim that his twisted intentions were good and therefore deserve forgiveness? Do you dare go and ask the innocent people who died, or the warriors who sacrificed themselves, or those who lost loved ones and homes? Do you dare ask them if they're willing to forgive Psyche? The queen had no answer. Fujimiya answered for her. You wouldn't dare. Besides, you are no longer the queen. If not for the delicate diplomatic situation now, if not for keeping Earth out of fresh trouble with Ganon Star, Fujimiya thought coldly he would have slapped the queen for her foolish mercy. 185. A journey filled with love and hate. When Fujimiya felled Dr. Psyche with a single stroke and then unleashed a barrage of attacks that left Queen Amaterasu speechless, countless worlds fell silent. The audience held their breath as they watched Fujimiya, godlike in battle, with eyes full of gratitude and respect. Moments later, cheers erupted like an avalanche and a tidal wave. Good riddance. Time to pop the champagne. Fujimiya did great, as expected of Wang. He does what others wouldn't dare. Destroyed the villain with one sword, scolded Queen Amaterasu to her face. His swagger is off the charts. Too bad we can't touch the queen. Screw it, I'll switch to manual and do it myself. Even the juggler in the armory smiled brightly. His opinion of Fujimiya and Agul soared. Reflecting, he realized that aside from Miyabi, the person who had perhaps understood him most was Agul. They had only met once, but Agul's words had been unexpectedly sharp. Back then, Juggler, overthinking everything, had taken Fujimiya's proud concern as a reprimand and ignored it. Now, after many ups and downs and back in the armory, memories of Fujimiya's words and of past scenes, like Mebius defeating the Dark Emperor, began to make sense. Fighting alone wasn't the same as having someone at your side. He now had 3 little ones to protect and many friends. As someone who repaid both grudges and kindness, he wouldn't forget what Fujimiya had done. Well, I'll remember what you said. How long I'll remember it? Juggler hesitated, eyes drifting to a potted plant on the table. He traced a finger along a branch of the Tree of Life, then laughed with a hint of mischief. I'll remember your words as long as I remember Asuka Shin's. On screen, Fujimiya no longer paid the queen any mind. He merely exchanged a look with Kai. What are you standing there for? He asked. Kai followed Fujimiya's gaze and then saw Juggler. While everyone else gathered in a circle to celebrate, Juggler stood alone at the far edge, watching them with a lonely expression. Like a blade of grass in the roadside shade, his figure was barely visible through the swaying flowers and leaves. He didn't fit with the crowd. Since the mission, the death of Miyabi, the cutting down of the Tree of Life, Juggler had not lingered to chat. Except for the few times he'd saved Kai, he hid in corners and watched others' merriment. Disheveled, bruised, eyes full of disappointment, he kept acting selflessly to protect Kai because he treasured him as a close friend and did not want another farewell like Miyabi's. He also wanted to prove that without the Circle of Light's power, his strength was no weaker than anyone else's. His attempts to help had often been read as contempt, and he had not been accepted or understood. He had tried, but in the end, no one seemed to care. Asuka and the queen were in the crowd too. Juggler wouldn't come near them, even if he were mad. He sighed and was about to turn away, choosing to follow the wind into the vast universe to find answers, when Gamu gently patted Kai's shoulder. You and he are best friends, aren't you? Gamu whispered. Kai walked toward Juggler. Juggler, who had intended to leave with the breeze, did not expect Kai to come. Kai, he said without thinking, his voice tangled with confusion, surprise, bewilderment, and grievance. Juggler no longer believed they needed to travel together. Their philosophies had diverged, and emotional barriers weren't mended by a few words. Still, seeing Kai approach stirred a small joy. You're pretty hurt, Kai observed, glancing at his bruises. Do you want treatment? Juggler paused, then shook his head. It's just minor. Kai. Juggler met his friend's eyes and, as if deciding something, spoke plainly. I'm leaving. Leaving. Kai clenched his fist. He had had a vague premonition, but hearing it aloud made his chest heavy. Where are you going? Where? Juggler smiled faintly after a moment and said, Go ask the wind. With that, he dissolved into purple motes on a gentle breeze and drifted away. Against the desolate sunset, a lone shadow walked the horizon. Yet bathed in the afterglow, Juggler felt less alone. At least Kai had noticed before he left. He was setting out to find a power strong enough to stand on its own. Still, he told himself, we'll meet again soon. The scene shifted, and the commotion faded. Kai returned alone to Warrior's Peak. The cold wind brushed his cheek, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw Juggler opposite him, smiling a pure, unguarded smile, and then that image dispersed. The orb caliber glowed. The circle of light reminded Kai it was time to get back to work. If it weren't for Fujimiya and Gamu, Juggler would probably have left on his own, someone muttered. Yes, no one noticed him. Kai probably wouldn't have realized until the end. This blockhead? He's infuriating. Kurenai Guy watched the flood of complaints streaming across the screen and smiled wryly. He couldn't deny it. Back then, he had been slow to act. The scene in the sky shifted again, this time moving through years in a flash. Before everyone's eyes played the thousand-year feud between Kai and Juggler. Juggler had not truly abandoned Kai. He followed him, watching as Kai acquired the orb ring and collected the 4 elements. The beginning of Origin hadn't turned Juggler dark. The true turning point came later, during a journey across the universe. After witnessing countless wars and endless death, he grew disillusioned with light and justice and turned fully toward darkness. He obtained the Dark Ring, a manifestation of his inner jealousy. Even then, he couldn't let go of his best friend. He kept helping Kai collect the elements. On that journey, Juggler met Bianchi, a monster princess whose obsessive yandere love for him complicated his heart. But her devotion and the endless funerals he attended hollowed him out further. He and Kai had both suffered innumerable partings, friends and companions lost in the blood and tears of battle. The explosion of Diamond Nova, the auroras of the Golden Galaxy, cosmic marvels that were beautiful and unbearably painful. They were arenas and graves at once. Kai's half-apprentice was indirectly killed because of Juggler, one of the first times Kai was truly hurt by him. Juggler had countless chances to kill Kai, but never took them. He began to fear life itself. Everything would end, and the beauty of the present only made future separation more despairing. Having lost his homeland in childhood, Juggler had experienced less beauty than most. Darkness and chaos felt more enduring. His personality shifted. He resented being rejected by the circle of light and wanted to defeat light to prove himself. The regret of not having had the power to protect those he loved turned into a hunger for strength. Kai, chosen and acknowledged by the circle of light, became the center of his world and the whetstone for his ambition. Juggler used the power of demon beasts and was repeatedly defeated by Kai, and in frustration, he had shouted, "Would it kill you to let me win once, you bastard?" Zero, absorbed in the footage so thoroughly, he forgot he still wore his shining form, watched from the fourth-dimensional sewer. Juggler's 1,000 years of regret reminded him of his own past, the self who once tried to touch the plasma spark tower. Seeing Juggler come to terms with himself made Zero shake his head. The two of them were similar in some ways. Both traveled from resentment and dissatisfaction toward a painful reconciliation with their inner demons. Both had lost loved ones. Zero, however, had been luckier in the end. His family and companions were eventually revived. Juggler had not. Masaki Keigo, meditating in the TPC Dragonfield, watched too. His life was different, but he felt moved seeing Juggler rejected by the Circle of Light and seeing Kurenai Guy become Orb. Memories of Aizen Makoto, worshipping Orb, turning into Dark Orb, committing villainous acts in the name of heroism, surfaced, along with the face of Geidi, whom he had killed. Regret gnawed at him. He had wanted to protect the Earth from the start. Why had things gone this way? The giant had left the stone statue and Geidi behind for protection, and yet they vanished because of him. In another timeline of the Honkai world, a white-haired girl watched the footage thoughtfully. Her hair tips were gradually darkening. A metal headdress hugged the side of her head, a black-red remnant feather fluttering like a spark, and a black robe patterned in an ornate design draped her shoulders. "Do you crave others' affirmation, Port Juggler?" she murmured, as if speaking to him and to herself. "Can't you be a bit more carefree? Just do what you want." An embrace 1,000 years later was both the end and the beginning. Juggler and Kurenai Guy's story had stretched across a millennium. Their long war finally reached a breaking point when Orb and Magazetan clashed on Earth, a fight that nearly annihilated both and produced the catastrophic Lusaka explosion. Juggler could not stand to let Kurenai Guy suffer the loss of someone he loved. The justice buried deep inside him at last surged forth. He risked grievous injury to save Kurenai Guy's beloved Natasha. The scar on the chest of his phantom demon form came from that rescue. It was reminiscent of how he'd once saved and settled Bianchi, whom he had treated like a pawn. In that battle, Orb's original power ebbed away, and Kurenai Guy had to fight by borrowing the residual energies of other Ultramen. Out of that desperation arose the legend of the Det King's founder. After 1,000 years of conflict, everything converged on one rooftop. They defeated each other again and again, Juggler vowing countless times not to interfere, only to intervene again and again. Neither of them fully understood what they were searching for. On the Orb Timeline's Earth, on a rooftop, Juggler held Naomi hostage. Maga Orochi's dying roar echoed across the city while the VTL charged forward, locking itself in a death struggle with the monster. With the Snakeheart sword pressed to Naomi's throat, Juggler looked at Kurenai Guy and smiled like a blade. "You cannot defeat Maga Orochi," he said, "nor can you save this woman. The Earth you love is about to vanish." "Kurenai Guy roared, the name spilling from him, love and hatred braided together. Juggler stared at him and felt oddly dizzy. "Kurenai Guy, you are the only thing that's kept me alive all these years," he thought. 1,000 years had pushed his fear of nothingness to its limits. Life flickered like a spark. The world stretched into an instant of eternity. He feared the unstoppable sorrow of losing it all. And Kurenai Guy, his closest friend, was the one thing that stopped him from plunging into that void. Juggler had saved Kurenai Guy many times. Hadn't Kurenai Guy also been saving Juggler? Juggler had tried to snuff out Kurenai Guy's light with the darkness of the demon beasts, and then with his own darkness. He had tried to assimilate him and failed. In the end, he put his hopes in Orochi's darkness. Now everything was about to die. If he defeated Kurenai Guy, Orochi would destroy everything. Kurenai Guy would fall in battle, and Juggler would lose his last reason to live. He laughed then, a bitter, helpless sound. "Kurenai Guy," he said between sobs, "you and I have seen too much, from the explosion of Diamond Nova to the aurora of the Golden Galaxy." Tears shone in Juggler's eyes, not with brilliance, but with sorrow. His voice choked just as it had once under the bridge in the beginning of Origin. "These memories will vanish, like brilliant stars, so dazzling, so fleeting. In the end, they all disappear." He pointed the sword at Kurenai Guy, laughing and crying at once. "Do you know what the only eternal thing is, Guy? Do you? It's a void of darkness. This darkness inside your heart, my heart, everyone's heart, an inner black hole that can never be filled." Around that fragment of recorded memory, viewers murmured and argued, speculating about what had driven him to choose nothingness, whether unbearable loneliness and unmet beauty had pushed him over the edge after millennia of pain, and whether his suffering had forced him into the path he'd taken. Some insisted he'd been hurt, but could still find his own light. Others wondered what he was doing now. At that moment in the armory, everyone was watching Juggler. Hebikura, who bore a striking resemblance to Juggler and had repeatedly insisted he wasn't the same man, sat under scrutiny. It wasn't impossible that two people in different universes looked the same. After all, the Ultra Brothers, the three heroes, even Bianchi and Yuka offered precedence. But the clip showed a Juggler shattered and weeping, and nobody quite believed the cheerful, generous Hebikura could be that same broken man. Haruki and Yoko exchanged nervous glances. Only Yuka moved to Hebikura's side and said quietly, "Captain, your eyelashes are trembling." Whether Hebikura was Juggler or not didn't matter to her. She simply felt a strange sadness and patted his shoulder. The dazed Hebikura snapped out of it and turned away, embarrassed that the footage was being shown, especially with the three kids watching. Back on the rooftop in the footage, Kurenai Guy's eyes reddened. He shook his head and spoke, firm as ever. Darkness is not eternal. The only eternal thing is love. That line made Juggler falter. Kurenai Guy held his gaze steadily. Over the 1,000 years, countless companions had been lost to him too, but he could not yield to fear. He was the shield for innumerable lives, the orb who would wipe out evil and save the weak. That was why the Circle of Light had chosen him. But Kurenai Guy was lonely beneath the stern exterior. He fretted over small pleasures, cried in private, and felt those tiny human aches no one saw. Still, he believed in bonds, in love. He said to Juggler, "Love keeps this universe turning. Love can shine in the darkness. Love is the light of hope." Juggler had always known Kurenai Guy's words were true, and yet the prejudice in him blinded him to something else. While he'd been trying to protect Kurenai Guy had been cleaning up Juggler's messes all along. If Kurenai Guy hadn't carried the love of friends and family in his heart, Juggler might never have survived. But Juggler's sorrow turned to anger. He stamped his foot and screamed, "Even now you talk of love and hope and expect them to save everything. Ha!" He raised the blade to Naomi's neck again. "I'll cut it all short." Naomi showed no fear. She faced Kurenai Guy directly. Though their time had been brief, Naomi would not forget him. She would not let her spirit be extinguished. Her frank courage brought Juggler images of Miyabi. If Miyabi were alive, she might have spoken to him like this. He had always blamed himself for Miyabi's death. Whether fully his fault or not, he carried the guilt. His hands trembled uncontrollably. "Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!" he howled. A fighter jet, struck down by Orochi, came crashing down. It exploded between Juggler and Naomi, swallowing them both in flame. Kurenai Guy lunged to save them, but it seemed too late. Then the scene cut to the ruins. Juggler stood breathing hard, clutching an unharmed Naomi. He had, instinctively, saved her, just as he had once saved Natasha. Naomi looked at him, eyes lighting up. "So the person from my dream was you." Juggler saved Naomi. I knew it. How could the man who tried to save Ganon's star be completely without tenderness? So he was never wholly evil. Was 1,000 years of pain the thing that pushed him down this road? It's never too late to make amends. Voices rose and buzzed among onlookers. Juggler turned away, full of shame and confusion. There was still light in him, still a capacity for tenderness. He longed for it like the man he had once been. Kurenai Guy approached. Naomi, stunned, tried to make sense of it. "You were the one who saved Natasha back then, weren't you? So the person in my dream was Natasha's memory?" Juggler murmured, voice hoarse. "By the time I realized, I had already saved her. She smiled at me. It was so inexplicable, so I ran." He looked at Naomi, eyes reddened. "Kurenai Guy's weakness is that he can't abandon the weak. But why? Do I have that same weakness?" Tears fell again. The contradiction between the darkness he'd embraced and the part of him that still ached for light tormented Juggler. Then Kurenai Guy grabbed him by the collar and landed a solid punch, a personality correction punch, just as Juggler had once done to him when he was under a puppet's influence. Afterwards, Kurenai Guy pulled him into a tight embrace. "Thank you," Kurenai Guy said quietly. Those words untangled something inside Juggler. Natasha had not died. And more than that, the swordsman in black who had fought beside Kurenai Guy so long ago had not been lost. He had simply lost his way. The light that had saved Natasha a century earlier was now being reflected back through her descendant, dispelling some of the gloom in Juggler's eyes. Kurenai Guy's embrace warmed the part of him shrouded in despair. After 1,000 years of being driven toward darkness and oblivion, Juggler at last met and accepted the light, choosing him in that instant. From then on, that light would illuminate him with a steady love and warmth. "Naomi is in your hands," Kurenai Guy said, patting Juggler's back, then turned and sprinted alone toward Maga Orochi. Note, the Juggler arc is coming to a close, though he may reappear later. He's arguably one of the most distinctive characters in Ultraman history. His arc is spread across 3 TV series and 2 novels, so his chapters and psychological descriptions run deep. Unlike other characters who can be summed up in a few scenes, understanding Juggler properly really requires seeing those works, especially the beginning of Origin. I rewatched it twice to do him justice. It left my heart aching. Also, Blazar is fantastic. the most hardcore and original opening in Ultraman history. They're finally tearing up suit monsters again, and there's actual blood. If the suit's mouth could open, I'd expect Blazar, that wild man, to bite the monsters with his teeth. Taguchi, My Superman. Chapter 187, The Curtain Falls, but a new beginning dawns. Mago Orochi, the strongest of the demon beasts, far beyond any we've sealed before. Ultraman Orb's already at a disadvantage. He can't take it down alone. Orb poured everything into his attacks, but the Orochi overwhelmed him, leaving him unable to retaliate. The audience waited, waiting for the other warrior to break the stalemate. Juggler. On the screen, Juggler lay slumped against a wall, lost in himself. Muttering, "What am I doing? What am I even doing?" He banged his head against the wall in self-reproach until his thoughts blurred. 1,000 years of obsession, Miyabi's death, his rejection of the light, his hatred for his homeland, had hollowed him out. He had lost faith in the light and in justice. And yet, in the end, he still yearned to be understood and to protect someone. He didn't know where to go. Naomi saw the broken man reflected in his eyes, sorrow and helplessness, but more than that, she felt a flash of exasperation. "How long are you going to wallow?" she demanded, and her shout pulled him back to the present. She knelt beside him and gripped his shoulders. "You promised to have coffee with me at dawn, didn't you? If you don't fight now, there won't be another dawn." Seeing him avert his gaze, her voice softened. "If it weren't for you, I'd have died long ago." She reached out her hand. "Stand up, Juggler." Naomi smiled with serious trust. For a heartbeat, Miyabi's face overlapped with Naomi's in Juggler's mind, the same sunlit smile. "Master, don't give up. Get up." "You won't disappoint, Guy, will you? You won't disappoint everyone who cares about you, will you?" In that moment, Gamu said, watching, if he can stand, he'll break free from 1,000 years of confusion. Fujimiya's lips twitched. After all, Juggler was someone both he and Agol had admired. Back on the battlefield, Orb was still being savaged. A massive, galaxy-devouring maw clamped down on his arm and held him fast. He raised the supreme holy sword, the hilt spinning like an ultra bracelet, and forced the Orochi to loosen its grip. The timer blinked red. Orb dropped to one knee, gasping. The Orochi, seizing its moment, readied a devastating charge. Whoosh! Boom! A blade of light cleaved through the Orochi's lightning charge. The beast staggered and crashed, and a nearby building split cleanly in two along the cut. As the slab slid down the diagonal, it revealed the figure behind it. "It's Juggler! He came! He can giantize now! Hey, Ultraman Juggler!" Cheers erupted. Juggler didn't gloat. He quietly reached out his hand to Orb. "I'm not here for you," his expression said. "Don't misunderstand. I'm here to atone." Naomi smiled with relief. Orb gripped Juggler's hand and rose. No words passed between them. They simply took their stances. But whoever knew them best understood. No explanation was needed. Standing side by side after 1,000 years of torment said everything. Reconciled, the two fought with dazzling teamwork. The Orochi's overwhelming attacks pounded at them. Orb stepped forward and used his sword to shield Juggler. As explosions and flames filled the sky, Orb bent down and Juggler vaulted onto his back, springing in front of the beast. The snakeheart sword bit into the Orochi's crown, sparks flying. Juggler struck and retreated, the Orochi's lightning wrapped around him. Orb's orb caliber cut through and deflected those attacks, even turning some back against the Orochi. Their combination looked decisive, but the damage was small. Finally, the VTL played a rare but crucial role. With Ultraman's guidance and the help of Zenta and Mori, humanity discovered the Orochi's weak spot and relayed it to Orb and Juggler. They understood immediately and charged together, landing a crushing blow that made golden ichor gush from the beast's vital point. "Fire all your beams at that spot," Juggler ordered. But the Orochi reacted viciously, whipping out tentacles. Orb was shoved back. Juggler was seized and held before the beast. The constricting force made him groan, but he screamed to Orb through the pain, "Attack, even with me!" Orb froze. To destroy a foe like this, he had to risk everything, which could mean losing Juggler. He looked at the sacred sword in his hands. He had already lost too many friends. Could he personally kill the most important person in his life? "Hurry, Ultraman Orb!" Juggler's pained roar rang in his ears. Here, Juggler called him Guy, once more, a sign that he fully recognized him. Juggler used the name because he feared Guy wouldn't want to hurt him otherwise. When Juggler slipped into calls like that, it tugged at Guy's emotion. Guy could not let feeling ruin the fight. Orb was a warrior who protected all living things. He could not let sentiment cost more lives. That was Guy's ideal, and Juggler chose it now. He chose to help. Guy's eyes went cold. He raised the orb caliber and launched everything he had. 8 Ultra Warriors appeared beside him: Belial, Zero, Mebius, Tiga, Ultraman, Taro, Jack, and Zafi. 9 battle roars sounded as each of them, together with Guy, unleashed their ultimate moves. A brilliant, torrent-like fusion beam overwhelmed the sunlight. Orb Supreme Holy Sword. Time slowed. Juggler glanced at the light and gave Guy a carefree smile. Farewell. The next instant, both he and the Orochi were swallowed by the beam. Flames erupted from within the Orochi, bursting outward like an expanding fireball. The beast exploded into fragments. As the sun sank, the Orochi was gone, and Juggler with it. Only the Snakeheart sword remained, jutting from the ground. Orb stood quietly, staring at the sword that caught the sunset's afterglow, then turned and flew toward the sun. Did Juggler really die? Why didn't Orb pick up his sword? Viewers asked. Kurenai Guy popped a bottle of Ramune and smiled. That guy isn't that easy to kill. Scenes returned. Juggler appeared again, no longer confused but full of spirit, the liberation of finding a path. He had let go of the old obsessions, but not the desire to be better. Beneath the cynicism, he still secretly compared himself to Guy, but the rivalry had changed. It had become a purer wish. In Moriboshi Dan's movie, he intervened so Guy wouldn't lose to others. In the Gilbara's battle, he probed the enemy to uncover weaknesses before Guy could. His obsession hadn't been dissolved. It had been transformed into something more beautiful. Guy had been Juggler's spiritual anchor, but not his salvation. After the Demon Beast War ended, Juggler's life broadened beyond one person. He still hadn't found what filled his heart, and he began to wander familiar places. He playfully grabbed Riku Asakura's and Little Riku's butts, returned to Ganon Star where he was wanted, and left an Okinawan lion doll and a bouquet at Miyabi's grave, the things he'd asked Riku to buy. He saw Bianchi again and arranged for the amnesiac girl who adored him to be cared for by an old Mr. Genobi. Finally, he entrusted a seed of life to someone, a small snake he gave to Bianchi, and said goodbye. There is only one tree of life in each universe. When the tree dies, its seed sprouts elsewhere. Chasing Grugeo Bone, he came to another Earth and saw the seed in his pocket already sprouting tiny leaves. The place where that life took root meant the planet was worth saving. For the first time, the murderer and arsonist known across worlds wanted to nurture something, to feel what Guy felt. On that Earth, he met a young man named Hebikura and found the defense organization called Armory. In its members, he saw faces that reminded him of old acquaintances. Maybe here he would find his salvation. The flashing montage ended. Even though many viewers had trouble catching every scene, everyone felt happy for Juggler. He'd finally found somewhere to entrust his heart. Armory. Stare. Yuka stared intently. Haruki and Yoko stood beside her. Captain, are you really not Juggler? I thought I saw the armory in that glimpse. You're mistaken, Juggler said coolly. People from different universes just look alike. You and that Bianchi are practically twins. If he didn't admit it, then Hebikura and Juggler could remain separate. He urged them to get back to work. But the phantom demon form in the mask was so handsome. Wouldn't it be great if you really were him? Yuka's eyes sparkled. Juggler smiled and sipped his coffee. I'm already a handsome guy, no less than Guy. Then Yuka said, entirely too casually, I really want to dissect him. He nearly choked on his drink. He pushed Yuka and Yoko away. Haruki, who'd once been seen through by Juggler when he was Zeta's human host, hung back awkwardly. Juggler morphed into his showman persona with a laugh in his ear. What are you being shy about? Nothing. Haruki scrambled away. Watching the armory members get on with their tasks, Juggler sighed and stepped out of the command room alone. He looked up at the warm sun and the blue sky. Light fell just so, and the corners of his mouth lifted in spite of himself. He had been drowning in fear and pain, unable to find his way. He'd always centered others, never found his own identity. He no longer needed to prove himself to the light. Now he would carve out his own life. Guy, Juggler chuckled privately. Even here, he had people he couldn't let go of. Their smiles and worries were more precious than the brilliant galaxies and blazing novas he'd seen over 1,000 years. Now, I truly won't help you anymore. 188. The beginning of the Legend of Heroes. At this point, Juggler's segment came to a temporary end. The scoring round, if there would be one at all, had long since been decided. The first solo fan competition had only 4 contestants, and everyone tacitly accepted Juggler as the champion with a perfect score. Kurenai Guy, of course, would give his good brother the highest mark without hesitation. Carmiara, who felt a strange resonance with Juggler, tsundere as ever, also left a perfect score. The remaining veteran judges needed no comment. Even the 6th guest, who had been a black screen the whole time, gave Brother Juggler the top mark. The first solo fan competition concludes here. Soon, several new contestants will appear in the second competition. Please look forward to it. It was obvious now. The show had been tailor-made for Juggler. Were the first 3 just supporting players for him? Many viewers suddenly realized that even a lowly Slan alien competing in Juggler's group had benefited from his presence. Over in the Kingdom universe, Tregear snorted to himself. If he had shown up in that segment, he wouldn't have known how to react. Don't be fooled by old Tregear's indifferent manner. If embarrassing moments from his youth were exposed, like the little poems he had written in secret, and if Taro found them, Tregear would be mortified enough to ask Brother Taro to open the Naraka space so he could crawl inside and sulk. When Taro had accidentally discovered them before, he had lost his composure completely. His loud shouts had made everyone in the library turn to stare. Juggler, huh? What an interesting fellow, Tregear muttered, looking at his azure form. Not bound to darkness or light, refusing chaotic nihilism, forging his own path. Several days later, new text flashed across the dark screen. One simple word, hero. That single word felt like a breath of fresh air. The definition of hero is varied and deeply subjective. Someone brave, someone who sacrifices for others, someone who stands unflinching against danger. There were as many kinds of heroes as there were hearts to name them. Royal-blooded, passionate warriors like Zero and Mebius were heroes. Tragic, lone figures like Juggler were heroes too. Almost every character shown so far, aside from a handful of villains, deserved the title. That variety made viewers wonder, what would the next hero be like? Why call him simply hero? Was he an ultra warrior? An alien like Juggler or Zamusha? Or perhaps just a human? The reveal was surprisingly concise. Silver armor in a Japanese style, a red timer on his chest like wings. Fans who had seen him before immediately recognized the figure. It's Nexus, the one who humbled Captain Ree and Titan. I thought he was a rare spirit from planet Babel, so he doesn't live there after all. This looks like a hot-blooded, royal-blooded story. Recall of Nexus's past, the little golden sword wanting to cut Noah and getting slapped down by Xiao Nai, the brief glimpse of his clash with Dark Mephisto in the time-space castle, had many viewers already picturing him as the hero of a fiery manga. Nexus, who does he answer to? Haruki asked. I'm not sure, Zeta replied, but I've heard he's connected to Noah. Brother Mebius once mentioned him. Mebius had said of Nexus that he was a noble warrior who lived by the creed, the bond of light will be passed on and shine again. Light is a bond. Nexus, that's awesome, Haruki sighed, excited. The video started. From the opening shot, many viewers felt a chill. It was Earth, but the footage was filtered in gloom. On a fog-shrouded mountain road, cars crawled along as their passengers sang and ate hot pot. An uncle at the driver's side shouted to ask if the driver wanted to sing. Then a strange shriek pierced the air. A giant slug-like creature floated ahead. Splat, a glob of black, viscous bile splattered across the windshield. What happened next was told in the screams and the sudden sound of brakes. The car emptied. The slug extended a tentacle, snatched the last person fleeing outside the car, dragged them into its maw, and absorbed them. Liquid Space Beast, Pedron. Space Beast. The name threw many viewers off balance. Not a kaiju, not a choju, something else entirely. Space beasts were mysterious life forms that had come from the depths of space. Their numbers were unknown, but more than one. They could emit special space beast vibration waves to share information among themselves. They possessed terrifying vitality and could evolve rapidly by absorbing an opponent's abilities and data. Ordinary people did not even know they existed. That sounds brutal, someone said. Like a hive mind, another observed. If they learn from each fight, then defeating one only makes the next encounter harder, a third worried. Does that mean this is the story of a lonely hero? Speculation erupted. Among the commentators were Ultra Warriors who had faced Space Beasts before. Zero, Ginga X. Space Beasts, I fought one once, Ginga recalled. Dark Garberos, I think. Zero fought it too. It's one of those recurring threats. How strong was it? Victory asked. It was tough, Ginga said with a modest smile. I barely had time to flash my lights. I remember Taro acting as referee that day and being completely unrestrained. The scene cut back to the mountain road. A black car approached but stopped behind the wrecked vehicle. A young man climbed out and peered into the empty compartment. Komon Kazuki called, "Anyone there?" No answer came, only an open beer can rolled toward him. When he picked it up, disgusting black ooze dripped from the opening. He threw it away, alarmed. A shriek came from behind. Komon's hair stood on end as he turned slowly and saw something that made his pupils contract. Elsewhere in the forest, another man in black ran toward the road as if drawn by a scent. Himea-jun slowed, feeling a presence. He pulled the evil thruster from his chest and whispered, bewildered, "What do you want me to do?" Thump, thump, the evil thruster pulsed green, as if answering him. So this is the human host? Viewers guessed. I thought it would be Komon. Maybe it's both. Who says there can only be one? Back at the road, Komon sprinted with tentacles snapping just behind him. No matter how fast he ran, human limits held him back. A tentacle snaked around his waist and dragged him toward the open maw of the beast. Komon grabbed the railing with all his strength as his fingers slipped inch by inch. Memories flooded his mind, plunging into surging water, thrashing, gasping for breath, and then a hand reached out, warm against his palm, and a voice urged, "Don't give up." Emboldened, Komon strained and struggled again. Sweat poured down his face, his muscles tearing with effort, when a beam of light split the gloom, like sunlight in the night, a red, sun-like radiance carved through the darkness. A huge, blurry object descended from that light, aimed precisely at the roaring Pedron. Pedron, gorged from a car full of people and feeling invincible, had been leisurely preparing Komon as an after-dinner snack. Before it realized danger, a massive shadow had already crushed it to the ground. Boom! Like a meteor, the shadow struck. The beast that had been roaring a moment before vanished into scattered points of white light. Invisible shockwaves rippled outward. Komon, shaken, lay on the road and slowly turned his head. His pupils shrank to pinpricks, like everyone watching, when he saw the fist. A gigantic armored fist, crackling with arc-light plasma, was buried deep in the ground. The silver giant who had thrown it stood in the evening glow, wind whipping at his form, white smoke curling like a veil as he withdrew his hand. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. The giant glanced at Komon once, an inscrutable, silent look, then vanished into the twilight where sunset met night. His departure was not the end. It was the beginning, the first stroke in the legend that would be written by the hero named Nexus. P.S. Off topic. I didn't plan to start a new chapter focusing on Diga and Nexus. There are a few overzealous fans in both camps who read far too much into every mention. Even when I point it out, they still swarm the comment sections. Don't take it personally. I trust readers who've come this far are reasonable. Besides, it would be unfair to leave out Diga and Nexus. Diga was introduced alongside Triga after all. If you have time, check out Brother Otter's debunking video about Xiao Nai. 189. This light is my punishment. What does death truly feel like for a human being? Is it the soul leaving the body, or simply the end of bodily functions? Is it trivial or sacred and heavy? I've wondered that for a long time. For years now, death has been a constant in my life. My name is Himea-jun. I'm 27, a wanderer who spends most of his time around Shinjuku, and I'm unmarried. I used to be an investigative reporter for a newspaper. I traveled constantly and didn't get home until 8 at night. I don't smoke and drink only rarely. I go to bed at 11, make sure to get 8 hours sleep, drink a cup of warm milk, do 20 minutes of stretching, good habits, so the doctors told me. My coworkers used to call me passionate, a young man with a strong sense of justice. I suppose at first that was true. I wanted to use my camera to expose injustice. But the deeper I dug, the uglier human desire looked. I grew tired of prying into people's hearts. I began to distrust humanity itself. In that cold world, what reason did people have to move forward? Part of me insisted humanity wasn't all bad, but my poison had taken hold. I couldn't continue. I left to be a war correspondent in a foreign conflict zone, searching for some kind of redemption. There was only the cruelty of life and death there. I went with a readiness to die. On the chaotic battlefield, I met a simple, lovely girl. Her family had been killed by the war, but she hadn't lost her goodness. Her name was Sarah. She treated me like an older brother. My dark heart brightened a little because of her. Then, one day in the jungle, shells fell. Bullets peppered the air. I watched people collapse in the hail of gunfire. Limbs and blood splattered into the mud with the roar of ordnance. I thought the next second could be my end. War correspondents died too. I knew that, and I kept filming. If my pictures could make the world long for peace, then everything might be worth it. Thump, thump. My heart hammered, feared for the war around me, feared for those lives at the center of my lens. I recorded suffering and helplessness. My Nikon shutter clicked on, matching my pulse. Click, 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 click. Then I heard her voice. Jun. I'd never have mistaken it. Sarah's voice cut through the chaos. She appeared in my view, shaking, hands clapped over her ears, calling my name as she searched the battlefield. My heart stopped. Everything else fell away. My finger moved on instinct. Click. The shot hit like thunder in my ears. I looked up. She was looking at me, panic split into a smile. That was the last expression I ever saw on Sarah's face. The next instant, artillery fire came down from the sky. She vanished. Sarah died. She died because of this ugly war on her way to find me. I had caused her death. The photos of that moment were exhibited around the world. But the world didn't respond the way I had hoped, not with condemnation or a collective yearning for peace. They brought me awards, praise, admiration for my talent, for those blood-stained images. It felt like the world had consumed their suffering as entertainment and lauded me for it. I only wanted to expose cruelty, but my work turned their deaths into trophies. I had taken their rest from them. I had added to their burden in death. I quit the paper and abandoned everything. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every breath, every step was a fresh torment. Then in a dream, Sarah led me to a ruined temple. I felt a stone wing under my hand. Its presence guided me. The power it offered let me protect others, but every time I used it, the injuries it inflicted on enemies were reflected back onto me. That pain felt like atonement. It relieved me. It felt like punishment and judgment given shape. They called that light Nexus. Nexus's punishment and judgment were my reason to keep living. At last I believed I had the answer to my question. What does death mean to a human? The weight of a life isn't measured by how much it changes the world. It's measured by who it failed and who it fulfilled when it ended. Himea Jun's memory, a soft sob woven through it, fell silent across the various worlds. Does he really believe the Nexus light is his punishment? A voice asked. Maybe Sarah's death is still too raw for him to face himself. But it was the war that killed her, not just him, another replied. To shoulder all the blame, to accept the harshest divine punishment alone, that must be his plan. I can't help seeing shades of Hikari and Juggler in him, someone murmured. A defense team exists in this world too. Maybe Himea Jun will help them and work through his guilt, another hoped. The scene cut to the present. Under the night sky, a gigantic Padron loomed, massive beyond the ones we had seen before, as if fused from many beasts. Komon and the other Night Raiders rushed in to eliminate it, but they noticed something strange. 2 humans were bound to the Padron's tentacles. Worse, the creature wasn't eating them. It held them before its body like a shield. Wait, it's taking hostages? Komon breathed. Space beasts can learn and evolve, someone online reminded the chat. They have a kind of hive mind. Maybe it watched how we always put civilians first when fighting, another said. If the Night Raiders protect humans before killing beasts, the beasts could learn to use them as shields. The Night Raiders realized the creature had adapted to their tactics. For a beat, they hesitated. Komon fretted aloud. If we attack now, they'll die. On the command console, they called for instructions. The viewers watching breathlessly didn't expect the answer. From the command center, Staff Officer Kira ordered an attack on both the humans and the space beast. To an audience used to Ultraman saving everyone, this sounded monstrous. From a strategic viewpoint, however, Kira argued there was no choice. Allow the creature to learn from their restraint, and it would keep using hostages. It was a cruel tactical decision civilians had to accept when no Ultra Warrior was helping. Vice Captain Nagi Saijo raised her DeWitter separator, the specialized gun for dealing with space beasts. She was about to fire when Koman shoved himself in front of her, a desperate human plea against the cold calculus. On a nearby rooftop, a black figure watched the scene. Himea-jun held the evil truster in his hand. The familiar cost of transformation hung in his eyes, and for a moment he hesitated. He knew the price. He knew the pain and the risk of death that came with Nexus. But the hesitation washed away. He lifted the device, and the crimson light crashed down. Nexus reappeared. This was the first time the Night Raiders truly saw him for themselves. He gathered energy in his hand and unleashed a beam, plucking the two hostages from the Pedron's tentacles. Rescue beam. Whoosh! The beam carried them to safety. The Night Raiders scrambled to secure the rescued people. Relief rippled through them and through the viewers. Thank goodness. An Ultra Warrior had come. Nexus assumed a fighting stance and charged the Pedron, the classic spectacle unfolding, until an unexpected shot erupted from the ground and struck Nexus's right arm. Sparks flew. Even the swelling battle music cut out. Nexus staggered, stunned. Like Koman in the audience, Nexus searched for the source of that shot. It was Vice Captain Nagi Saijo, standing with the DeWitter separator leveled at him. Was it a mistake? Many thought she had slipped. Then she squeezed the trigger again. Countless viewers stared in disbelief. Why was she shooting at an ally? 190, no money area. Why would I dream that a defense team member shot at an Ultra Warrior who was saving people? Even if you don't understand Ultraman, the Space Beast was clearly attacking humans. If she had to shoot, she should have aimed at Pedron first. It looks personal. That's not the behavior of a professional defense team member. Viewers were stunned to see Nagi Saijo fire on Nexus. If you knew nothing about Ultraman, being suspicious of a giant stranger wouldn't be unusual. It would even be reasonable to watch the fight at a distance. But to open fire immediately, intentionally, was baffling. During the old Max incident, Mizuki had accidentally injured Max because of a sudden position swap with the monster. This was different. Nagi Saijo had aimed straight at Nexus. It was a mercy that an Ultra Warrior happened to be there instead of some hostile alien. Had she provoked a giant into attacking humans at the Vice Captain's command, the results could have been catastrophic. The camera cut to Nagi Saijo's memory. Against a gloomy backdrop, a little Nagi clutched a doll. A dark male silhouette loomed, its features obscured. Only the thick shadow and the sharp keratinous horns jutting from its shoulders were clear. Her parents had been killed by that figure. The dark shape stayed with her. Earlier, when Himea-jun had appeared, he'd also been framed in darkness, eerily similar to the figure from her past. Combined with her suspicion that Nexus might be a humanoid space beast, her hatred clouded her judgment and pushed her to act aggressively and impulsively toward Nexus. So Jun took the blame for that killer? But even if it was a humanoid space beast, she could have waited and let them finish fighting before doing anything. Her childhood trauma prevented her from assessing the situation calmly. She was too impulsive. Nagi Saijo's grief won sympathy, but her actions, blinded by hatred, made her hard to defend for countless viewers. Gaia World. Ho, if this were you and a ghoul back then, Gamu said, perplexed. Yeah, if it were the old me. Fujimiya let out a dry sneer. Before Gamu and others had helped him loosen his emotional knots, his priority had been to protect the Earth, not necessarily humanity. If Agul had been interrupted by a shot right after a dramatic entrance, the old Fujimiya would probably have put her in her place first. This is really impulsive, Daichi clicked his tongue. Why shoot Senior Nexus first? Nagi Saijo was the Night Raiders' vice captain. Wasn't she worried about provoking an unknown giant and putting her teammates at risk? In that case, my luck's pretty good, X said with a smile. When he first merged with Daichi to fight, Seo's immediate reaction had been to help him against Digma. He'd assumed defense teams in other worlds acted similarly. Back in the broadcast footage, Nexus, having been hit twice, showed no aggression toward humans. After a moment's confusion, he still went after Pedron. Nagi shoved Komon aside, trying to keep firing. Pedron, however, stood up for Nexus first. It released a dense white flammable gas that blanketed the area. Nagi had to stop shooting and could only watch as Pedron shaped itself into a disc and flew skyward. Nexus followed. Staff Officer Kira's voice cut in. The space beast is fleeing toward a densely populated area. Everybody watching sat up. Pedron scattered an enormous flammable cloud. Once it reached the city, even a tiny spark or stray current could trigger a massive blaze or explosion. 3 fighter jets took off in pursuit. Target 4,000 meters from the city. Approximately 30 seconds until it reaches the city. We can't catch up. Down below, the night city glittered with lights. People lived unaware of the looming disaster. Space beasts really do learn, someone said. Before it only kidnapped 2 hostages. Now it even uses the city as a shield. Nexus, sprinting at incredible speed on the feed, raised a hand to his color timer, and his armor lit. Amid the rippling of space like waves, the silver giant shifted into red form. Nexus red form. This red form, however, had nothing to do with cheerfulness. Daigo's idea of happy didn't fit. With a deep, resonant roar, Nexus fired a brilliant blue beam that caught up with Pedron instantly. The beam did not strike the beast. It passed around it and detonated in the void ahead. A golden-yellow flash formed a circular field of particles that swelled like a whirlpool. Pedron, unable to react, was sucked in. Nexus followed and closed the door behind them. He dragged the battle into the metafield. "Come and play at my place," he seemed to say. Inside the metafield, the Ultra and the monster vanished from the Night Raider's sensors. The jets hung in the air, baffled. Komon and the others looked around, confused by the sudden disappearance. Seconds later, a loud bang crackled above, and a green fireball flickered in the sky before vanishing so quickly it seemed like an illusion. Immediately after, a red sphere of light emerged from the dissolved green glow and dropped to the ground. Nexus stepped out, and Pedron did not. The implication was clear. A few seconds inside the metafield, and Nexus had eliminated the threat. The nearby city had been spared. Land of Light. Indeed, that's the metafield's greatest function. Someone commented, "I suspected something when I saw him beat Senior Libet earlier." Pulling a battle into subspace to avoid collateral damage is an incredibly useful skill. It's a shame none of us can learn it. Hiss, but Father of Ultra has a similar move. Curious young Ultras chatted about domain skills that strengthen the user while weakening the enemy. Father of Ultra analyzed the field. A warped space-time domain generated by phase folds. "Is it the same as your Ultra Cocoon field?" a junior asked. "Of course not," Father of Ultra replied with a wry chuckle. "My cocoon field doesn't leave original space-time, nor does it strengthen the user while weakening the enemy. Still, both protect the outside world," the young Ultra said. Father of Ultra shook his head, smiling. "If the enemy is stronger or unusual, such a domain can be countered, and then it can turn into one of the toughest fights you'll ever have." He remembered the day-long battle against Belial inside the cocoon field, one of the hardest fights of his life. Nexus might someday face a similar challenge. Act 3. As before, Nexus' world was shrouded in a gloomy filter. The camera swept over mountains and settled on a group of hikers. The scene shifted abruptly. A grotesque, monstrous head unfurled from the rock and swallowed the hikers whole. Amid gut-chilling crunches came faint human screams. That snake-like head was only a segment of a larger body. The main mass writhed with flesh covered in black chitinous plating, and enormous crystalline organs on its back glowed with the light it used to traverse space. The devouring head was just its tail. The creature, Grugelum. In Grugelum's path lay a satellite city of hundreds of thousands. The Night Raiders began drawing up a plan, and what shocked people was their chosen tactic. To avoid causing chaos, they opted not to warn the satellite city. In other words, they intended to use those hundreds of thousands of lives as bait to lure Grugelum, then lock onto it and take it out while it moved. Apparently, they hadn't fully considered what would happen if the operation failed, or what disaster would befall those unsuspecting people. P.S. Speaking of which, Nexus has always been a somewhat unusual children's show. When it launched, it faced 2 heavyweights, Gundam Seed and Full Metal Alchemist, which dominated primetime, so Nexus had to air on Saturday mornings at 7:30. Imagine kids turning on the TV on a Saturday morning expecting the new Ultraman and then seeing, under a gloomy filter, a grotesque space beast eating people. It wouldn't feel out of place next to the terrifying scenes from Showa-era classics. For some reason, it also calls to mind Redman, a children's show that's even bolder in its shock value. 191. A passionate heart must not be extinguished. Grugulum possessed an uncanny ability to heal itself. In earlier fights, it had gravely wounded Nexus twice. The Night Raiders' attacks had never dealt truly decisive damage. Because of this, and to ensure Grugulum's predictable path, the Night Raiders' High Command had more than once led the beast into areas where ordinary people lived. In the Nexus world, there were organizations and technologies specifically designed to erase or transfer people's memories of space beasts and ultra warriors. Unbelievable. The Night Raiders' High Command actually plans to use over 100,000 people as bait. Space beasts feed on human fear. Maybe they think not issuing an evacuation notice will stop the beasts from getting stronger. What humans fear most is the unknown. Trying to hide it forever won't work. This isn't the right way to handle it. Hiding darkness under cloth blinds you to the existence of light. Erasing fear from memory makes people forget Yuki and how to face things. The decision not to evacuate, justified in the name of avoiding panic, sparked immediate outrage. Fighting a powerful enemy often required sacrifice, but defense teams of other worlds had always risked their own lives for the public. Guts had been nearly wiped out trying to stop Dinosaur. Only Ryu and Serizawa had survived. The Mac team, where Leo and Seven once served, had suffered astonishing losses while protecting Earth. They had been heroes, not commanders who used civilians as bait. Once it became known that the Night Raiders had done this more than once, the organization's leadership was branded cold-blooded. Even if the tactic could be argued as preventing space beasts from feeding on panic, it felt cruel. No one could guarantee they wouldn't be among the sacrificed. Those who gave the orders could watch deaths be reduced to statistics and then plan the next operation. The so-called baiting never included the decision-makers. They could sacrifice others at will while keeping a righteous facade. In moments like this, people longed all the more for heroes to appear. In the Land of Light, Old Man Seven, Moriboshi Dan, watched the Night Raiders in silence. Perhaps their choices had been pragmatically necessary, he thought, but he could not accept such disregard for human life. The Night Raiders did have decent people, Commander Wakura and Komon Kazuki among them, but even Commander Matsunaga had failed to tell subordinates that the satellite city had not been evacuated. The previous operation against Grugulum had only been disclosed to Wakura afterwards. He had protested that using human lives as bait was unacceptable, but he could not change his superior's mind. "Brother, are you disappointed in them?" Jack could read the bitterness in Seven's face. He understood how this warrior, so devoted to humanity, felt about the decision. Jack felt it too. Matsunaga's plan was rationalized for the sake of humanity, but that did not make it acceptable. The claim that those sacrificed would have died for a worthy cause rang hollow when no one could even guarantee success. Jack had argued repeatedly that all lives held equal value. Dying for the public without your consent or knowledge was not noble. It was simply dying used as a statistic. If being bait was going to be imposed, why didn't Matsunaga and the others volunteer themselves? The Night Raiders had started as protectors of the people, yet they chose to use the people as bait. Sacrifice was terrible. What was worse was treating it as inevitable and ordinary. When principles were trampled and human lives became mere numbers, how long could the original intent survive? Still, Jack believed in human potential. Good people and children symbolizing the future existed, and Ultra Warriors could not abandon everyone for the sins of some. Ace's lesson resonated. A passionate heart must not be extinguished. Back with Guts, Shinjo glanced up and casually said, "Seeing it from this angle, I like Director Sawai even more." "Me too," others echoed. Daigo said nothing, but anger flared in his eyes. This fight, however, wasn't his to lead. It was Jun's. The resonance of light made Daigo and the other human host warriors believe that, though Hameya Jun had been hurt by humans, seen their indifference, and suffered under the weight of light, he would still stand alone and unhesitatingly face the impossible. Humans always had such heroes. Perhaps that was why Jun had earned his title. In the Nexus world, Komon sat staring at the screen. Using so many lives to lure space beasts, is that what my future will become? He asked himself. The High Command had kept frontline combatants like him in the dark. That omission chilled him more than anything. But Komon worried even more about Jun. This aptitude holder of Nexus had saved Komon's life many times and carried a deep, painful past. At first, Komon had seen Nexus as a god, but after getting to know Jun, he realized Jun was only an ordinary person wielding the power of light, someone who saved the world and bore his scars alone. If Jun's identity were exposed, Komon feared what some in the Night Raiders might do. Men like Nagi Saijo, who was prejudiced against Nexus, or unknown-minded high-ranking officers. Jun lay in the stone wing, recovering. He had fought Grugelum twice in brutal hand-to-hand clashes and already had been pushed beyond his limits many times. His body was full of holes. Those scars came not only from space beasts, but in part from the Night Raiders' weapons. Unlike in some worlds where fighter jets emitted smoke and fell, Nexus World had the blessings of the Visitor's black technology. Weapons tailored for space beasts had measurable effects on Nexus. But Jun was human. He felt pain fully and absolutely. Nexus's human hosts were different from those of other Ultra Warriors. They were called aptitude holders, heirs of the light of Nexus passed down through generations. The price for that inheritance was high. All damage the Nexus form suffered was reflected back onto the human host without mitigation. Other Ultra Warriors could sometimes be separated from their hosts by force to prevent both from dying. Aptitude holders could not. The only ways out were to fulfill one's mission, like past aptitude holders Shunichi Maki or Sayuri Tachibana, or to die in battle. Jun, crushed by guilt and convinced of light as punishment, seemed likely to choose the latter. He didn't even know what his true mission was. He could only march toward death in the hope of easing his conscience. War was both instinct and shackle. Protecting others was the same. When human hosts bore every injury themselves, would they still form bonds with people? Some young Ultra Warriors wondered whether they would prefer to change their nature, become like Mebius or Leo, or if, upon meeting the right person, they would still choose to merge. No one could answer for certain. On the footage, the Night Raiders were preparing their strike. The plan was for Komon's Chester Delta to destroy the space beast's organ that enabled spatial travel. Staff Officer Kira's analysis said the regenerative organ would take 480 seconds to regrow. In that interval, the other 3 fighters would open fire to finish the beast. 4 fighter jets launched from the dam-like base, streaking into the bruised twilight. Jun, meanwhile, lay sweating in the stone wing, dreaming of the moment Grugelum had gravely wounded him. He was having nightmares. His constantly injured left shoulder, struck by both space beasts and the Night Raiders, had left him with deep psychological trauma. The flashing timer nearby was not the sign of a transformation time limit. Jun had no such restriction, but a warning from his exhausted body. It told him the situation was urgent. If the light on the timer stopped flashing, it might mean his death. Form the mega cannon, Chester. Nagi Saijo barked, and 3 of the fighter jets transformed and linked in midair. Red lasers arced along their connection points as they fused into a single cannon vehicle. Only one fighter remained separate in the sky, the one piloted by Komon. He pursued Grugelum. 192. At the boundary between light and darkness, a man stands holding up the sky. In the Nexus world, inside the Night Raiders' Miracle House. Nagi Saijo couldn't help glancing at Komon, who sat beside her with an astonished look. She'd already noticed that when the Nexus videos appeared in this world, only a select few could actually see them. She was one of those people. Komon was another. The other Night Raiders, even the higher-ups, hadn't seen anything. Why that was, whether she and Komon shared some unusual constitution, Nagi didn't know. What surprised her more was the change in Komon the footage showed. His gaze and demeanor were far more mature than his current youthful face. In the Ultraman universe, it made grim sense. Losing a loved one and being tormented by the enemy often marked the road of a protagonist. In that sense, Komon's future echoed a certain senior's path. Still, Nagi cared less about Komon's transformation than about one comforting fact. Even after the Ultra Warrior appeared, The Night Raiders in the footage found ways to fight back and held their own. Indeed, even without an Ultra Warrior, we can still put Space Beasts down, just like before. Nagi still didn't trust Himea Jun or Nexus. To her, the Ultra Warrior was another unknown humanoid force, perhaps a space beast. The shadow that had taken her parents and the figure of Himea Jun in the night still overlapped in her mind. In the Zeta world. Oh, so the human authorities there chose this method? Kaburagi, possessed by Cerebro, smiled with a crooked, sinister grin. Should I go play there in the future? Sounds interesting. But first, he walked down an empty corridor, a vial of dark green liquid clutched in his hand. He pressed the Z-riser and slipped into the Gul'dan-colored Zeta Miracle House. The liquid sloshed, a Gashapon machine clicked to life. Hey, I even took a bath before drawing today. Surely I'll get something good. A medal with Jiras printed on it tumbled out. Damn it, Kaburagi muttered. Why did I get such a blue sky, white clouds thing? I'm not in the mood for Karkarida right now. Whatever, maybe I can feed it to another monster, fuse it and upgrade. In the footage, Grugulum confirmed at phase coordinate E29. Komon located the space beast and reported to the command center. He pushed the throttle. Super hypersonic generator, full load. A bluish-green glow wrapped the fighter jet, and its flight accelerated sharply. The Delta vanished into the night. What kind of black tech is this? The onlookers exclaimed. I want to fly it manually. Is this alien technology? Defense teams across worlds watched with envy and curiosity. Even Sayo was stunned. This sort of space-traversing capability was astonishing. Dr. German, the copy king, was already scheming. Akito, little Hikari, stared, wide-eyed. The Night Raiders' tech was top tier. If they truly teamed with Nexus, 1 + 1 could become more than 2. Of course, sometimes the Night Raiders seemed to be using Nexus as a target to point at, rather than a partner. In a strange bluish-green expanse, Komon hunted again and finally found Grugulum. As the team's newest member, a rookie who had once dropped his gun, he'd shown rapid learning and impressively mature piloting skill. After narrowly dodging an attack, the prism on Grugulum's back began to glow, apparently about to slip through space and escape. Rectangular shockwave, fire, whoosh, boom. 4 beams shot from the fighter and struck, precisely shattering the prism. What powerful, vigorous piloting! For a time, Komon earned the title of ace pilot in several worlds. Buzz, stripped of its luminous organ, Grugulum shrieked and was yanked back into the real world. It reappeared directly in front of the Night Raiders' cannon. 400 seconds until Grugulum's organ recovers. Leave it to me, Nagi Saijo said. Mega cannon, fire! She pulled the trigger. Shimmering particles gathered in the air, converging before the twin barrels atop the tank. The surrounding space trembled. This was the Night Raiders' confidence. Elite soldiers plus advanced visitors' tech meant ordinary monsters could be dealt with decisively. One blast would pulverize the enemy. Boom! The shell struck with overwhelming force, but Grugulum activated a shield. The damage was negligible. Even space beasts nowadays knew to raise shields, yet it seemed some Ultra Warriors still hadn't learned that. Nagi's eyes widened. It's not working. Grugulum's shield halved the attack's effect. While the team tried to comprehend it, Shiori's gasp drew everyone's attention. Look, its luminous organ. They stared, stunned. The white crystal pillar Komon had shattered had already regrown in that short span. Even Kira, the normally unflappable commander in the control room, looked shaken. As a son of Prometheus and a man with precognitive gifts, his rare surprise meant they had truly miscalculated. It recovered faster than last time. Its adaptability is terrifying. In that moment, the Night Raiders understood with mounting despair. Their plan had failed, and failed without warning. There was no turning back now. Captain Wakura's guilt surged. The satellite city not far away held over 100,000 people. Had the higher-ups considered what would happen if their interception failed? Their arrogance made it seem as if they hadn't. Under different circumstances, observers from other worlds might have sneered or made snide remarks. Now they couldn't bring themselves to laugh. Tens of thousands of lives hung by a thread. This was no place for jokes. Some would argue that sacrifice is inevitable, that cruel reality does not spare the unwilling. But there are always those who will stand in fire and blood to protect others, who give their lives so the rest can type safely on keyboards. Whether in a world with ultra warriors or in an ordinary one, people like that make peaceful life possible. The audience could only watch. The camera cut. In the satellite city, the night was beautiful, lights ablaze, ordinary citizens going about their lives. The town was small, but it was home. Day after day of mundane living had its comforts. Not far from the glow, however, something monstrously hideous crept through the darkness toward those lights. If it reached the city, every bit of beauty and joy would be wiped away. Komon circled above, stunned. He could clearly see the string of lights under the night sky. Countless people lived there. He'd assumed they had been evacuated and that the plan would succeed. He kept telling himself not to give up. Himea Jun had urged him the same, but now Komon had no answer. He couldn't think of a way to stop the space beast. Then a piercing light flickered in the sky, and a uniquely shaped stone wing cut through the night. As it brushed past the delta, time seemed to stall. Komon whispered, bewildered, "Mr. Himea?" He didn't understand why Himea Jun would appear now, battered and wounded, rushing toward the enemy as if throwing himself into the breach. The stone wing swept by the fighter. Himea's body was near its limit despite the wing's healing properties. Raising his hand made him wince and grimace with pain. It was the destiny of a warrior, and Himea accepted his atonement. He had once wrestled with a question: what does death mean? He decided the weight of death lies in the instant life is lost, who is let down, and who is fulfilled. That thought drove him now. He would not permit people to die like Sara did, and he would not let others be consumed by guilt at losing loved ones. Himea gripped the evol thruster and raised it high. Yah! A roar of life escaped him. 10,000 beams of light burst forth. The silver giant shot skyward, and as soon as it appeared, it assumed its red youth form. It landed at the merging edge of light and darkness, tall and fierce despite its wounds, facing the enemy that had twice pushed him to the brink. The camera pulled back. A single point of light appeared behind Nexus. Then another, until countless lights from homes dotted the wilderness. How beautiful those lights were. Nexus stood before this human home, unheralded, unknown to the world, yet steadfastly guarding life. He looked at once tragic and sacred, a lone figure between the world and annihilation. The darkness before him was the boundary, the ground beneath his feet the forbidden zone. Behind him, no space beast would pass. The night wind stung. Nexus gathered his power and exhaled a deep roar, assuming a fighting stance. Infinite battle intent filled him in an instant. The swift wind touches. The path of inquiry is cold. Who will drink with me? Who dares to stand guard? The swallow's halberd returns, but the destined one does not. P.S. On the 13th, I might have to take leave, an important medical checkup, and then immediate travel. I'll be back the same day, but probably very late, so I may not be able to guarantee an update. Please forgive me. Oh, and suddenly, I really want to use the scene of Yan Guiran fighting the mad Liu Huo Kanglong as the basis for Himea Jun's final battle. Why are you still not dead? Why are you still not dead? Die! Die! Die quickly! That line would be so fun to give to Mephisto. 193, fighting fiercely for the dream in their hearts, like a raging storm. On the wilderness, the wind fell away, the clouds froze, and the world held its breath. For the sake of 100,000 lives, a warrior, red as fire, planted his feet and prepared to fight. Wounded from countless blows, he stood like a sentinel before the countless twinkling lights of the city. The scattered lamps stretched into the distance, painting a picture of peace and life. At the giant's feet lay the border between light and shadow. Ahead loomed a massive, terrifying space beast, dragging its warped form as it charged toward him. On one side was the city's prosperous, bustling nightscape. Not far off, a desperate fight raged on the edge of death. When that stark, shocking contrast revealed itself, audiences across worlds finally understood why Himea Jun's title of hero felt so singular. He was like Tiga once was, standing alone against a Jijera to protect humanity. But unlike Tiga, this Nexus had no flowers, no cheers, no public gratitude or hopeful faces. Because of the memory police and the river Styx, save for the Night Raiders and a few others, humanity didn't even know he existed. This was a battle destined to be lonely, a battle of self-sacrifice that belonged to a hero. Jun could not retreat. Then the battle erupted. Grugelum was far from humanoid, but not weak. After 3 clashes, it had already learned Nexus's patterns and noticed that each encounter left him weaker. It, on the other hand, grew ever fiercer. Faced with its reckless charge, Nexus was briefly overwhelmed, barely holding on. The scene shifted. In a small room, Nanaha was asked if she wanted to give up photography. She hesitated, then slowly nodded. After a quiet moment, she looked up and said, "No, I think I'll try again. The reason I chose this job was because I wanted to pass a smile on to someone else. Even if Mr. Ibo is gone, it would be a shame to quit just because the person who could photograph me best isn't here anymore." Her words echoed the chorus of "Hero." It's okay to cry. You only need to smile again. Nanaha couldn't explain it, but a peculiar presence touched her. She felt as if something important lay half forgotten inside her, a passion suddenly burning brighter. It was as if a power and a will were being quietly inherited deep in her soul, a promise that even if Jun gave his life, the light he guarded would not be extinguished. When Nanaha and her friend resolved to keep going, a faint force seemed to link them to the warrior of light, subtle, almost imperceptible, but already there. One day, that light would spread and gather into the universe's strongest form. Back on the battlefield, Nexus seized an opening and struck back. Boom! After several brutal kicks, he sent Grugelum sprawling. But victory did not come easy. Gasping, Nexus could barely hold his stance. His left shoulder, already grievously damaged, throbbed anew from the self-sacrificing kick. Even this short exchange had sapped a tremendous amount of strength. A normal fighter should not be exhausted like this, unless he had endured relentless, high-intensity combat and carried countless wounds before this moment. Elsewhere, deep in the four-dimensional sewer, Zero felt the resonance of the ultimate bracelet and formed a guess. You and he must be connected, he mused. Perhaps the person in the time-space castle then was the same. Recalling what the taciturn Xiaonai had once said, Zero grew almost certain that the nexus of that time had been Himeya Jun, a metafield, dragging the battle into subspace, timespace, and a shining form. He had a flash of inspiration, the gears finally turning. A lonely hero, he could be a role model. In the Hyperion's captain's quarters, Himeko watched Nexus's figure with a thoughtful expression. It felt like a strange kind of fate. Her Valkyrie battlesuit, Crimson Impulse, ran on a power system called Nexus. The Hyperion's power source was the same. When she defeated a Hersher-fied Mai, it was by forcing her prototype suit to tap into the ship's nuclear fusion reactor, summoning Hersher-level power at the cost of devastating her own life functions. In that respect, the two women whose names contained Jaime shared something in common. Even so, Himeko admired Himeya Jun deeply. The scale and intensity of his battles were beyond what she had faced. Silently she prayed, "Mr. Himeya, please live. See the light you passed on for yourself." Then she hurried off to drag Kiana, who was playing games, over to watch and learn. Realizing he could no longer afford to be tied up with the beast, its struggle risking the city behind him, Nexus's right hand glowed with a brilliant blue aura. He thrust his arm skyward and reactivated the metafield. Sparks flew from his sleeve. Golden, rain-like light fell and wrapped the surrounding space. Nexus and Grugelum vanished from the real world. This time he was not alone. The Night Raiders, watching the battle, were moved by Nexus's determination to protect. Komon, who had been staring blankly, was snapped out of his daze by Captain Wakura's sharp call. "Komon!" Fighter jets peeled apart and rose, escorting the Delta as they prepared to follow. Captain Wakura, who had long resented his superior's willingness to sacrifice 100,000 lives, made a choice of heart over orders. "We break into the metafield and support the Ultra Warrior," he commanded. "Understood." Komon answered immediately, fanboy admiration flooding him. "Understood." Vice Captain Nagi Saijo responded as well. What Nexus had done could not have been the work of a mere space beast. He brought people a sense of safety and light, nothing like the grim darkness wrought by the one who had killed her parents. Nagi watched silently. Her future self, like Komon, had shouted "understood." Did that mean she, too, accepted that light? No, she thought. Acceptance wasn't the right word. She had no right to force herself to believe, but nor was blind hostility justified. In her memories, no Ultra Warrior had ever appeared in this world. Vigilance was necessary. Yet to open fire at the slightest divergence, to keep attacking, Nagi realized that was a product of her own obsession. As she watched the wounded being stand before countless civilians and guard them alone, her prejudice began to loosen, almost to fracture. Himea Jun and the man who had killed her parents evoked entirely different feelings. Some of the scars on that guardian were even ones she herself had inflicted. Each wound would make his next battle harder. She looked at the screen with complicated eyes. Generator. Full load. Koman and Nagi unhesitatingly piloted their fighters through layers of space and dove into the metafield. Inside, the world changed. A barren, crumbled expanse stretched in every direction, a ruined arena where life and death were the price of entry. This was the interior of the metafield, the battleground Nexus had been dragging his enemies into, time and again, to keep them from harming humanity. Metafield entry successful, both reported, but the next sight froze everyone. Nexus's timer, some kind of life limit counter, was flashing red. He clapped a hand to his chest and panted hard. He could barely stand. His breathing came in ragged bursts. Each step was slower and more unsteady than the first time he had appeared. Whatever reserves he had left were slipping away. He still raised a hand, determined to keep fighting Grugelum, but the power inside him drained rapidly. A tide of unimaginable fatigue and pain washed over his body and will. At last, after 2 days of bitter combat, the godlike guardian staggered. Ugh! A sound of unwilling surrender and exhaustion escaped him. Nexus, the blood-stained war god, his divine power driven to its limit, could no longer resist the surging fatigue. He finally fell on the path he had sworn to walk. 194, an invincible hero, whose scars are the spark of courage. Nexus collapsed. He didn't want to. His refusal was obvious, but he still fell, powerless, into the cold, empty wind. The camera locked on Nexus's profile. Fragments of light, recording past memories, flowed into the eyes of millions watching with bated breath. The images varied, but all showed Nexus fighting space beasts, angry and relentless against Bagbazoon, its claws ripped at his left leg. Later, Nagi Saijo's attack cut that same leg again, splattering golden blood. He had fought Dark Faust in the Dark Field many times, battered and bruised, his status indicator flashing red. There had been Garberos, Ravlea, and countless other space beasts. These were only the battles the Night Raiders had witnessed. In places they could not see, places countless people could not see, Himea Jun had fought innumerable fights. He rushed in, transformed, fought, was wounded, recovered, then rushed in again. Over and over it repeated, but now even opportunities to recover had dwindled. Jun's life had become a cycle of rushing, transforming, fighting, getting injured, pressing on. Enemies kept appearing and growing stronger. Sometimes he fought several battles in a single day. He could only fight and fight again, doing his best to get to battlefields before space beasts or other hidden threats could harm more people. The high-intensity combat, the lack of proper treatment and rest, turned recovery itself into a kind of suffering. The Stone Wing, once a place to rest and regain strength, had become merely a temporary, worry-free means of travel for snatching a little sleep. Even safe sleep no longer existed. Sarah's death and the punishment of light haunted Jun's face even in his dreams. He dragged his tattered, broken body and forced himself back into battle against anything that threatened humanity. And now, the hero was going to fall. The timer's ticking grew urgent. His white eyes seemed to dim. How could this be? Koman, hovering nearby, widened his eyes. His thoughts echoed the pain millions felt for Jun. I realized at last that it had to happen. Even as an ultra warrior, the man Himea Jun was still just an ordinary human. It wasn't surprising his body would reach its limits. Jun was a reporter, not a trained soldier. Koman looked at the struggling giant and thought of the loneliness, the distress, the pain, how little he truly understood of what Jun carried. Then he murmured the man's name. Mr. Himea. Nexus struggled again and again. Each time he tried to rise, he fell back helplessly. What drove him was unbreakable will. What forced him down was his body's insistence on surviving. Both on and off the screen, even the iron-hearted Nagi Saijo was shaken by Jun. The Nagi Saijo inside the video and the Nagi Saijo watching it felt the same storm in their hearts. How could this Nexus, this Himea Jun, be an enemy of humanity? Regret flooded her. She regretted the first shot she fired at Nexus. Regretted pulling the fighter jet's trigger when he'd been locked in battle with Bagbazoon. For a hero who had given his all to protect life, her hatred had not disappeared, but her prejudice against Jun and Nexus did in that moment. From now on, she would no longer attack Nexus. Perhaps the future would be a little better because of it. Nagi Saijo clenched her fists and swore it to herself. "Teacher, what's wrong?" Genos asked, watching a dazed Saitama. "Ah, he reminds me of someone," Saitama said, scratching his ear. He meant Moomin Rider, who had been nearly beaten to death by the Deep Sea King. Compared to Nexus, Moomin Rider's combat power was negligible. But the way both men fought to the death to protect others stirred Saitama's easygoing heart. A hero isn't defined by strength alone. A hero is someone who does the impossible because it is right. That righteousness moves people. Power does not. "Seems nobody can help him. I hope he makes it through," Saitama said quietly, his keen eyes fixed on the screen. On screen, because Nexus was weakening, the metafield itself began to destabilize. Grugulum roared over the fallen Nexus and backed away. It had sensed the change. The bizarre subspace began to crack like melting ice. Crack. The next instant, a section of the void shattered, revealing the world behind it. Millions watching had their pupils constrict. The broken metafield overlapped exactly with the city Nexus was trying to protect. Boom. Grugulum's massive, grotesque form slammed again and again against the transparent membrane. Golden ripples and electric arcs surged. The rift between the subspace and reality widened. The metafield's solidity was eroding, but just holding the field together had already pushed Nexus to his limit. "The Ultra Warrior's combat ability is dropping fast. The metafield's maintenance is failing," someone reported. "If we can still keep it up a little longer, we must take Grugulum down. Go around and smash it to pieces. Koman, cover the Ultra Warrior." The Night Raiders launched a coordinated offensive, demonstrating superb teamwork and firepower. Unexpectedly, even hits to the Space Beast's weak points failed to do effective damage. Grugulum still pushed toward the rift. At that moment, Nexus finally sank to one knee. The rescue beam he used to save people could also restrain Space Beasts. A deep blue beam uncoiled and wrapped around Grugulum. Nexus gathered what remained of his power into his hands. With a great heave, he flung the enemy away. Boom! Grugulum slammed into the ground, the impact reverberating through the subspace. As it howled in pain, dust and debris swirled, and the weakened Nexus rose again. He was breathing hard, visibly exhausted, but his eyes still held that same unbending resolution. Grugulum's cries turned to incredulous rage. "Why wouldn't this guy die?" It charged. Nexus crossed his arms as blue electric arcs coiled between his two wrist blades. He raised them like an impenetrable net. "Who? Ah!" he roared, opening and closing his arms. A blinding beam erupted from his right arm. Layer storm, a stream of light capable of annihilating molecules, slammed into Grugulum's skull. The beast shrieked and reeled, but could not escape its fate. Rumble. In an instant, it was blasted to pieces, reduced to countless blue motes that dissipated into nothing. The desperate gamble paid off. Nexus collapsed, gasping for breath, utterly spent from the effort, but he had won. The city on the other side of the rift still shone with light. People's lives remained undisturbed. They did not know that just now a warrior had nearly given his life to protect them. "Ultra Warrior," Koman breathed, thrilled. Nexus seemed to hear him. He turned slowly and met the Night Raiders' gaze, giving them a solemn ultra nod, a silent acknowledgement of comradeship. This battle had become, in truth, one of mutual recognition. Then, with a weary sigh, Nexus released his transformation. The metafield faded. Under the night sky, Himeajun's body hit the ground, limp. He had managed to hide the darkness from everyone. The Night Raiders no longer aimed their weapons at Nexus. He struggled, turned over, raised his hand to call the Stonewing to leave and get the healing he so desperately needed. What Jun and many viewers didn't expect was that the kindness of people would meet him next. Instead, he heard vehicles approaching, headlights cutting across his sweat-streaked, furrowed face. The next moment, a group in white biohazard suits surrounded him, weapons at the ready. "P.S. I'm back. Sigh. I'm tired." By the way, the Ultraman universe and Pily share some things in common, like uncontrollable power creep over long story arcs, and the idea of destiny where the boss can only be defeated by the protagonist of that arc. Like how the main TV boss of an Ultraman series can only be beaten by the titular Ultraman, Other characters are given contrived reasons why they can't help. Think Triga in Decker's finale and movie. And the pattern of an invincible hero at first who's then humbled over a few episodes is typical. Once their series ends, many Ultraman characters seem to receive similar treatment. When a dozen dark muzzles were trained on him, Himei Jun felt dazed for a moment. He had anticipated something like this, though. He wanted to understand what the light of Nexus on him truly was, so he only resisted verbally a few times and didn't put up much of a fight. His hand still gripped the Evil Truster. With a flick, he could have summoned a stone wing, but he hesitated and finally lowered it. The TLT recovery and cleanup team captured him smoothly. He likely never imagined what would follow. "Begin recovery operations," came the order over the radio. Hands grabbed him from all sides. He was soon covered in sweat and held down. The team produced a special anesthetic and jabbed it into the back of his neck. The world went black. Commander Matsunaga, superior of the recovery unit, received the news with a calm, almost smiling voice. "Excellent. Take him to the laboratory, but be extremely careful." His smile showed something else beneath the surface: greed and confident ambition. He didn't seem to care what catastrophe might befall the 100,000 people of Satellite City if Nexus were gone. All he saw was a chance to dissect Jun's body, analyze the light of Nexus, and use that knowledge to develop powerful weapons and equipment to fight the ever-increasing space beasts. That obsession had taken root after his wife died in the one disaster. Jun and the people of Satellite City were not part of his calculations. The footage stunned viewers everywhere. Many thought they were dreaming. Voices rose online and on the air: outrage, disbelief, dark humor. Some righteous viewers cried betrayal. Even villains watching hesitated, unsure whether to mock or sigh. An Ultra who had given his life to protecting humanity had been subdued by humans and hauled off for study. On the Land of Light, the young warriors watched in silence. "Humans, how could they?" they said. "I thought being misunderstood was the worst," another admitted. "Is the Earth and the people we protect even worth it?" a third asked, troubled. Jack watched the juniors' confusion and spoke gently. "A group is made of countless individuals, each different. I've met pure-hearted aliens, and I've met humans who bullied and killed without thinking. I once questioned them. Couldn't they tell what was alive? But they still killed." He recounted bitter memories. When monsters appeared, those same people who boasted courage fled in panic and begged the Ultras to handle it. The juniors fell quiet. Someone asked, "So did you still fight?" Jack looked as if he were gazing across light years. "I went to fight, but not because I had no anger or because I was foolish enough to help the ungrateful. Someone told me, 'Go, the streets are already in chaos.'" That line woke me from my confusion. I realized that even though there are ugly people, there are also many kind and righteous ones, and they too suffer at the hands of monsters. He stepped forward, solemn. "To love humanity and Earth, you must accept humans' duality, their strengths and weaknesses, their beauty and ugliness. If we reject all of humanity because of the few who are cruel, that is our failure as Ultra Warriors." Back on Earth, the existence of Nexus and space beasts had not gone entirely unnoticed. Nagoro published the photos Horokwa had taken, pictures of Nexus fighting space beasts, but the story was drowned out by sensational headlines. When Nagoro bought his own paper and saw the truth squeezed out, he discovered the memory police on his trail instead. Jun's ordeal, meanwhile, had only begun. He was stripped of his shirt and tightly bound to an operating table. Blinding lights pierced his closed eyes and forced him awake. He opened his eyes to a room full of armed researchers. Nearby, the Evil Truster and an energy blaster were locked in a glass cabinet. "Awake," someone said. "The surgery was successful. You're—" Before he could finish a question, a mask was clapped over his face. The hero who had burned himself to shield humanity now felt like a lab animal. In the monitoring room, Matsunaga's voice was cold and clinical. "What we must learn is the source of this power, when and how he obtained it. Then scan his brain with electrostimulation," a subordinate, Yang Yongshin, suggested. A device was clamped over Jun's head. A violent current jolted him, ripping through his exhausted brain. Pain crashed over him like a tidal wave. He howled and clutched at the restraints. Images exploded in the minds of the observers as Jun's memories were forced up, running through a dim forest, attacked by Dark Faust, being shot by Nagi Saijo, eliminating Padron, saving Koman, being injured, and the one question that had been gnawing at him since Gorogi's words. Why do you fight? Jun was confused. He had risked everything to protect humanity, and now he was held at gunpoint and carted off for research. Why did he fight? The question echoed even as the technicians pushed for the origin memory. Matsunaga leaned forward, eager. He wanted to see the ancient ruins, the battlefield of death. The memory Jun least wanted to revisit, the death of Sarah. The scene that haunted Jun for nights on end, the wound that had driven him for so long. No, I don't want to see this, Jun screamed inwardly. I want him to see how I obtained that power. A nearby researcher explained in a low voice. Jun had hidden the truth by forcing his mind to replay the most painful images, Sarah's death, over and over. He had used his worst pain as a shield so that nobody with ill intent could plunder the secret of Nexus. He had lived that way, driven by that agony and the light that punished him, determined to protect humanity. The viewing room grew more tense. Jun's willpower and the repeated trauma blocked the technicians' probes. Matsunaga made a decision that sank like a stone through the audience. He proposed exposing Jun to space beast vibration wave radiation. The murmurs of the researchers turned to alarm. That will do immense harm to the human body, a scientist protested. Matsunaga only replied coldly, if we can understand his vibration signature, we can analyze the components of an Ultra Warrior's destructive ray. I will bear all consequences. The reaction was instantaneous and furious. Voices online and in the viewing room exploded with contempt. What will you bear? Are you protecting the Earth? You bastard, people shouted. Director Sawai cursed him so loudly he could have struck Matsunaga. If it were him, if he had discovered someone under his command who might be an Ultraman's human host, he would have protected that person, not brutalized him. Matsunaga, however, seemed determined to press Jun until he broke. Sawai's anger boiled. His knuckles itched to teach the commander a lesson. 196. Destiny in the new domain universe. Rio had forced herself to move on. She had stopped letting Asuka's departure distract her from the work that mattered. Yet when she watched the footage of Himea Jun strapped to an operating table and saw humans trying to extract and weaponize the power of light, memories she'd hoped to bury came rushing back. Chief Aide Kundo's brutal seizure of Asuka's light to produce an artificial Dyna and that creation's eventual corruption by the sphere. Rio could understand Kundo's motive. His reasoning wasn't wrong. Humans couldn't afford to leave their future to unknown giants of light. His desire to protect Earth had been fiercer than most. In the end, he had even sacrificed himself to help Asuka, but his methods had been extreme. The higher-ups at TLT were no different in kind, only less resolute. Commander Matsunaga, for all his steadiness, would never have the willingness to atone with his life. He didn't even intend to let Jun live. Watching Jun on the screen, Rio felt the same stubborn will to die she had seen in Asuka when he'd rushed into battle nearly powerless, an utterly selfless courage. She whispered to herself as if speaking to the screen, murmuring comforts she could not offer aloud. You're all like this, aren't you? Your inner strength is second to none. Mr. Himea, as long as there are people whose souls are touched by your light, you are not alone. Your light will be passed down forever. On the monitor, TLT's cruelest experiment continued. As preparations for the Space Beast vibration wave went forward, the Seer staff officer Kira appeared silently in the viewing room, watching Jun intently. Don't you resist? Kira asked aloud. Or have you lost the ability to resist? Jun's lips didn't move, but he answered with a thought that reached Kira directly. Maybe I want to know what it really means that I have this power. Kira studied the gaunt, exhausted face and asked again, harder this time. You're already covered in wounds. Why do you keep fighting? You'll die like this. Jun's eyes closed briefly. When he spoke, the resolve in him was clear despite his weakness. I have already made my resolution, but before I find the answer, I cannot die. What exactly are you looking for? Kira pressed. Jun couldn't say. He didn't even fully know. He fought and protected and kept charging into danger. He took wounds and kept going, but he was confused. especially because his connection to the light had become something like a punishment ever since Sarah's death. The wound in his heart hadn't healed. Kira lingered, pained, then faded back from the facility's feed. Despite his usual calm, the seer had been moved by Jun's suffering. He stayed to lend what aid he could, because the gap between humans and space beasts was widening, and it frightened him. At Matsunaga's command, the space beast vibration wave was focused on Jun's face. The white light that poured down was not warm. It was an agony unlike any Jun had known. It felt as though he were being cut into 1,000 pieces. The technicians barked readings. Spectrum amplification rate 3,000. They kept increasing it. 4,000. 5,000. Even the hard commander flinched. 5,000 was already at the theoretical maximum a human could withstand. Still, the experiment continued. Jun's pulse surged, 172, 200, higher, climbing out of normal bounds, past 300. Stop it! Some of the staff wanted to shout, but the orders held. The monitors shrieked as the pain became unbearable. Then the heart rate spiked, and in an instant fell flat. The alarm sounded. Beep. The line on the electrocardiogram turned into a single, steady flat line. For a breathless moment, the room panicked. Kira, who had been connected to Jun mentally moments before, raised an eyebrow. He sensed something wrong. Outside the city, a meteor cut through the night sky, a single blazing streak that briefly made everything else look small and fragile. In the viewing rooms and in homes, millions fell silent. No one had expected a hero would be reduced to a transplanted body in a lab, someone to be dissected and measured. The roar of Hideki-go echoed through memory like a verdict. He's flesh and blood too. Can't you see? But Jun had no comrades there to burst in and fight for him. He lay motionless on the table as Matsunaga ran forward with a defibrillator, desperate to restart the stopped heart. What frightened Matsunaga wasn't that Jun might have died. It was that if Jun died before they'd fully analyzed the Ultra Warrior's properties, all their research would be worthless. He needed the data. No shock, no CPR could bring a pulse back. The watchers waited, breath shallow. Then, faintly, the evultruster on Jun's person began to glow. A red light flared and the device activated, awakening Jun and whisking him away in a beam. Matsunaga, however, accomplished the one thing he came for. He'd recorded the Ultra Warrior's wave data. He hadn't collected transformation data, and Jun had escaped. On the Land of Light, Neos watched the footage with disgust. To kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, even if your goal is to protect humanity, that cannot be accepted. There were other ways to study ultra powers. CO, TPU, even monster-based research. Organizations like the Science Special Search Party proved humans could develop countermeasures and win without relying blindly on Ultramen. Yet Matsunaga had chosen the most extreme path. Neos admired Jun and Nexus. They'd been treated like traitors when they'd fought and destroyed parts of the city to stop threats. But in the end, people begged the Giants of Light to save them again. Humans' fear and hypocrisy sickened him. In the Night Raiders' base, Komon watched with a cold, pained expression. Jun had been treated like an object. Something had to be done. Komon felt hopeless. He alone could not take on TLT. The organization would always keep an eye on Jun and pounce on any opportunity to capture him. Even Nagi Saijo was burning with anger. Later, as Komon walked the base, a light suddenly appeared in the corridor. In it stood Himeya Jun. At the far end of the passage, Staff Officer Kira materialized as well. Kira's voice was heavy. I have one piece of advice. For the time being, you must not transform. Your injuries are far worse than anyone realized. If you transform and fight again. He let the sentence hang. The warning chilled the room. You might really die. Jun's voice was still weak, but he managed to answer. I don't intend to give my life, but sometimes I can't help myself. Kira looked long and hard at the hero who persistently sacrificed himself for others. He used his seer's sight and his judgment to help Jun, and through him to help humanity. But he had limits. With a last grave look, Kira dispersed. Jun exchanged a hopeful glance with Komon, then walked away. Across the Kingdom universe, Tregear watched the footage and tilted his head. Humans will even harm Ultra Warriors out of greed and desire, he mused. So it goes. He was strangely moved by Jun's stubbornness and despair. The thought that Jun's death might be near seemed to hang over him like a shadow. They're all hot-blooded fools, he sighed. Meanwhile, The Night Raiders detected an alarming spike in space beast activity. The same creature, the tentacled Cthulhu, was appearing in multiple places, its main body concealed in a phase-shifted space, while its tentacles reached into the city to snatch humans. People were being abducted from rooftops and alleys. On the roof of a tall building, a man watched the dark clouds gather and smiled coldly. "A feast for hell," he murmured. Back in the city, Jun was recovering at Saku's house when the Evol Thruster resonated again. Space beasts had appeared. He rose, readying his equipment. "Are you leaving?" Saku asked, eyes full of a mix of doubt and concern. "I may not understand the burden you carry. I can't know your pain fully, but you need rest too." Saku's quiet, earnest affection pressed on Jun in a way he did not allow himself to accept. He stood there a moment, looking at her, loneliness and resolve etched on his face, and something like a guilty indulgence flickered in his eyes. He had inherited the light, but he saw it as a sentence. He punished himself with battle and unhealed wounds, as if pain could replace the answers he sought. He'd tried to tell himself and his friends not to give up. He'd fought with everything he had. Still, part of him was running away. "I couldn't protect a lot of people. Some died because of me. I don't want anyone else to hurt anymore, especially you." His voice was quiet. It carried an apology that was for Saku and for Sarah. Saku's plea made him pause, not because he wavered, but because it pulled at a memory. Once, when war broke out, Sarah had grabbed him and told him not to go. He had left anyway. Sarah had gone after him and died. He remembered the reproach he'd never been able to answer. Jun inhaled, steel settling into him, as if apologizing to Sarah without words. Then he left. Saku stood frozen, the footsteps of his retreat echoing in her chest. She tried to call after him, but the words died in her throat. She felt as though this might be the last time she saw him. From the shadows behind her came a voice. "Are you really that worried about him?" Saku turned to see Gorogi's gloomy face. His eyes were flat, dangerous as always as he regarded someone tied closely to Jun. He snorted. "Let me cut down another pair," he thought with a cruel sneer. The chatter of others, fans and watchers scattered across the city, began to bark out pitiless petty lines about hostages and drama, but the truth was harsher. Jun had very few people who could stand in his way when danger came for him. Outside the city, at the shuttered mine where the newest abductions had occurred, Jun gripped the Evol Thruster. Kira's warning thrummed in his head. "If you transform again, you might really die." The line hung between him and inaction. Jun did not hesitate. He raised the device and let the crimson light claim him. A tentacle surged from the phasing vortex, wrapping around the last terrified miner and beginning to drag him into the void. Particle feathers shot from Nexus's hands, slicing the tentacle cleanly and saving the miner. The Giant of Light descended like a savior, standing protectively between the miners and the maw of the Cthulhu. Nexus's clear cry echoed. He sent feathers to sever other tendrils and rescue more people. But Cthulhu's limbs were unnaturally supple and fast. Though Nexus sliced and tore, the creature struck back with a barrage of tentacles from unpredictable angles. Jun's body, the human inside the armor, was already a battlefield of scars and fatigue. The difference in their strength showed the moment they clashed. Several tentacles wrapped around Nexus, binding him tight. The color timer on his chest flashed red. After only seconds of fighting, Jun's stamina had already reached its limit. The warning light burned ominously. Nexus was in crisis. The TLT higher-ups didn't count him a friend, but the Night Raiders had seen Junhameya's valiant struggle. As he fought, their fighter jets arrived and severed Cthulhu's tentacles, yet they couldn't find Cthulhu itself. Captain Wakura and Komon searched frantically for Jun and found nothing. They were among the few in this world who truly cared about him. Countless viewers, watching from afar, let out a collective sigh of relief at the sight of help finally arriving. Those ordinary bonds and small mercies were rare and precious in this world of ultra warriors. Meanwhile, the missing Jun, he staggered through the trees. He'd slipped into the classic forest-run segment again, a haze-filled wood that blurred everything around him. Through the mist, he heard a familiar voice. Sarah's face, ethereal and smiling, appeared beneath a tree. Regret surged through him as the girl materialized. "Sarah, I can't save anyone." "I can't save anyone," Jun whispered. He fell to his knees with a bang, as if crushed by his own powerlessness. "It's not over yet," Sarah's voice said, and a red light wrapped around Jun. He shielded his eyes, and when he opened them, he found himself in a desolate place. A gloomy plain stretched to an endless black sea, dotted with huge porous rocks. Above the landscape, a sign read, "Land of Finality." Then Jun jolted awake. The little forest had been his blurred consciousness at the edge of death. If not for Sarah's voice and the red light, he probably would have collapsed there for real. A terrifying roar filled the air. Kuthura, mutated and monstrous, shrieked nearby. Jun saw, at the foot of a mountain, Sakuta lying unconscious. He didn't understand why she was there. Before he could move, Kuthura breathed a black mist that washed over him, and his consciousness went dark again. "Mr. Himeya! Mr. Maya!" Komon shouted, and Jun woke up to find himself back in the misty wood. A dream within a dream? He tasted confusion, and then a keener clarity. Kuthura was real, and Sakuta had been real in that vision. Without listening to Komon's protests, Jun forced himself to his feet. "There's still something I have to do." He raised his energy blaster, called the Stone Wing, and prepared to go. Komon stared at his exhausted friend and asked the question thousands of viewers were thinking. "Why are you fighting so hard? What's the point?" Jun only looked at him and answered honestly, "I don't know. The light gave me this power, so..." He stepped onto the lowering stone wing. "If you keep doing this, you'll die. We can fight too." Komon's eyes were full of worry. "Let him go," Nagi Saijo said when she walked up. "Hurry, the memory police will be here soon." Her words finally made sense to Komon. Nagi, who had given Jun so much trouble before, now showed him goodwill. Jun felt some relief at that. For the first time in a long while, maybe the last time, he flashed a real relieved smile at them. It was rare and genuine, not bitter. Then the smile faltered. "Sorry," he whispered. He boarded the stone wing and disappeared from sight. Viewers who had seen Nagi and Komon both changed by Jun's influence felt a complicated warmth. Nagi saved by an alien, Komon's family destroyed by one. So much trust or hatred is extreme. If these two can be influenced, that may be the meaning of Nexus. Maybe they could inherit the light of Nexus. Jun must be happy to see Nagi understand. But their joy was mixed with dread. That smile meant Jun truly intended to give himself completely to the final battle. Humanity had found the dark gate to the Land of Finality through the revelation. The so-called Land of Finality was where the ultimate battle would take place. Jun had arrived a step ahead of them. There, he met his old friend Nagoro and saved him. A shot slammed into the ground at Nagoro's feet, forcing him to halt. "Go back. If you keep going, you'll only get yourself killed. I won't let anyone else die," Jun said. Nagoro turned, eyes complicated and unsteady with tears. "Himeya, what are you fighting for?" "What am I fighting for?" Jun lowered his gaze, then fixed it, light in his pupils. At that instant, space opposite them twisted open, the dark gate, and ugly tentacles lunged forward. "That is destiny," Jun said, gripping his evol thruster and running in a wash of dazzling red light. He stood in front of Nagoro, the silver giant Nexus descending, protecting him. He faced the ferocious enemy head-on, dragging his battered body forward without hesitation. This was Jun's destiny, to fight. And for Nagoro, documenting it was his destiny. He lifted his camera and filmed Nexus's valiant struggle. Nagoro believed that even if memories were erased, the light would not be snuffed out. One day that light would truly illuminate the world, the Land of Finality. Sakuta, roused by the trembling earth, turned and saw the silver giant. "That's Himeya," she whispered. Gorogi sneered as he narrated the origin of the light. The light from a distant universe had chosen Jun and allowed him to transform into a silver giant, but he had not fully understood its meaning. Nexus was already engaged in a desperate fight. After only a few exchanges, Kuthura's assault left Nexus weak, kneeling on one knee, hardly able to stand. Hikari watched with growing worry and knew at a glance Jun's body was riddled with wounds and his energy was nearly spent. He didn't even have enough strength for the red youth form. He was fighting in the child form, splitting a single unit of energy into two. Even so, Nexus kept the fight alive. Kuthura's tentacles lashed out and bound Nexus again. Under the crushing pressure, Nexus groaned in pain and his chest core began to flash red. For any other Ultra Warrior, a flashing core might mean a surge, a comeback. But for Nexus, it was an ominous signal. Death was drawing near. Himea-kun? Sakuda called out, helpless. Nexus looked at her as if to say, I will protect you. But Jun's will couldn't bridge the gap in strength. Boom. 1, 2, 3. Kuthura flung Nexus's battered frame, smashing him into the ground over and over. Gorogi laughed as he watched the tormented hero. Ha ha ha! Soon this light will belong to me. At that moment, the Night Raiders finally forced their way through the dark gate and arrived in the land of finality. As teammates, they were reliable, and the viewers had never wanted their arrival more desperately. But what they saw in breaking through space froze everyone in the sky. Nexus's body had been devastated beyond repair. The energy core on his chest no longer flashed red. After one last ripple like fresh blood, it dulled to gray. In an instant, Nexus lost his power. His tall silver form collapsed to the ground. Under the disbelieving eyes of the pilots and the millions watching, the silver giant's eyes dimmed. His light, which had once stood between people and darkness, had gone out. The Night Raiders' jets cut across the dim sky, drawn toward an even more terrible sight on the towering porous mountains ahead. Komon looked and murmured, "No way." They saw the hero they had trusted and admired, stripped of life, suspended by Kuthura's tentacles against the gloomy mountainside like some crucified relic. A suffocating despair filled the land of finality. 198, an undying light, an indomitable fighting spirit. It wasn't unusual for an Ultra Warrior to die in battle. Audiences had seen it many times. The Ultra Brothers, Max, Mebius, and Hikari, Zero and his comrades, likely more that no one had witnessed. But Jun's sacrifice felt different. Nexus had always been just one person. Jun hadn't resolved the heavy burden in his heart even at the last moment of his life in the Nexus world. Himea Jun lay in the stone wing, quietly watching his future unfold. Is this really the end? Relief, hope, and stubborn refusal wavered in his eyes. No one is truly fearless of death. Jun had said he didn't want to die. He had his reasons for fighting. A warrior's rest wasn't unacceptable, but he looked at Sakuda, held hostage by Gorogi and the Night Raiders who had just arrived. Had he failed to protect anyone? That kind of ending was unbearable. Komon's fury flared again in the ruined landscape. He shouted Jun's name, rage toward Gorogi spilling over. Just as he was about to attack, Gorogi shielded himself with Sakuda and gave Komon a wicked, triumphant smile. With a hostage in his grip, the Night Raiders couldn't risk striking. "You bastard," Komon roared. "You take hostages like it's a hobby." Jack, Ace, Leo, several Ultra Warriors who would never tolerate their loved ones being hurt, seethed. Confident everything was under control, Gorogi began to manipulate vine-like tentacles that wrapped around Nexus's body. "This is the wave of darkness," he announced. "When these creeping vines cover the battered body of the Ultra Warrior, Himea's light of life will finally vanish." He laughed as if savoring the moment. "Then the light that has become part of him will be released from this land of finality and absorbed by me. I will become an invincible, perfect being, higher, stronger." His manic laughter echoed through the land of finality. Outside of that space, across the human city, lights died. Rolling power outages showed the special vibration was bleeding into reality. Jun fell. But the Night Raiders hadn't given up. Kuthura became their first test subject, taken down by the elite coordination and advanced weaponry of the team, essentially hit by their ultimate ray, a layer storm-level weapon honed with Jun's own data. Kuthura looked at Gorogi as if to say, "You just watched me go down?" Gorogi applauded the humans mockingly, then finished the monster with a fatal strike. "Impressive," he said, and immediately added, "but this is meaningless." The camera of fate returned to Nexus. Vines surged from deep holes and began to completely bind him. "The execution is nearly complete." "The light of Nexus will not dissipate," someone said. In the land of light, in a classroom, Adis, who hadn't gone to hunt negative energy that day, lectured young recruits. Though not as famous as the other Ultra Brothers, the security force's youngsters liked him. He'd once been a teacher on Earth. His lessons made time fly. "Do you mean the one who will dissipate is Himea Jun?" someone asked. "For now, it appears so," Idis replied with a sigh, "but I feel regret. A warrior like him won't fall so easily. His greatest enemy isn't the space beast, nor fickle humans. It's himself. His heavy burden prevented him from understanding the true meaning of light. Light isn't punishment. As its name says, it's a bond." Idas saw through human hearts easily. If someone could have known Jun's state earlier, they would have flown to him and given counsel. Those who were involved were confused. Those who observed saw clearly. Jun had bound himself. If he had understood sooner, maybe he would have been spared. Still in the misty, deep forest, Jun woke to Sarah's voice. He couldn't say how many times he had come to this place, perhaps every time life flashed before him, when his body was at its worst and death loomed. He returned here. Jun opened his eyes slowly. The voice was like heavenly music. It gave him the strength to stand. Sarah. He looked at the girl whose face never seemed to age. Her smile always brought him peace. At the moment of death, to see that smile again felt like heaven's last forgiveness. This scene was different from the darker tones of earlier Nexus visions. The forest light was bright, dreamlike, warm. That brightness made it all the more heartbreaking, as if the world was giving him one last burst of life before he died. Jun, did you get a good photo? Sarah asked. Jun's smile faded. He frowned, eyes downcast, habitual now. I wanted to record people living, to find the meaning of life. He winced, but I ended up recording people dying. I was so terrible. He remembered past battlefields, Nexus fighting to the death again and again, throwing himself away to save others, falling, getting up, dragging a bruised body into the next fight. I fought until I was scarred and I died alone. That way, at least I could take on some of the guilt. Sarah stood bathed in gentle light. This power isn't a punishment. Jun was stunned. The Evol thruster in his hand reacted. A heartbeat-like pulse grew clearer. The crimson light revealed ruins of the ancient past. Sarah's words, soft, knowing, whispered in his ear. They sounded older than the girl's appearance, as if Jun's inner voice or some deeper guidance spoke through her. Maybe Noah's mysterious powers reached across time and space. Whatever the source, Sarah's voice reached Jun. This light chose you. Chosen, not punished? Jun murmured. The surprise in his face dimmed further. You guided me to get this light, he said, confused. I thought it was a penalty. This light has been passed down for a long time, Sarah replied. Those who received it lost something precious, and yet they fought on. The light links people together. Between humans and Ultra Warriors, and even between Ultra Warriors themselves, it is a chain of bonds. Outside the screen, Daigo and others tried to encourage the man bearing all that pain. Even if Jun couldn't hear them, those intentions seemed to echo. Light is a bond, Daigo said, words Jun had once acted on when helping Ace and Kengo. You, Jun, are part of the human's light in that world. You allow this light to keep passing on, connecting more people. Because of you, others can become light too. Jun, this isn't punishment. Stop chaining yourself. Nexus-senpai, your light never went out. You did nothing wrong. Komon's still fighting for you. Sakuta's praying for you. Don't lose yourself. These messages filled the air, foolish in one sense, because they knew Jun couldn't hear them, but natural, like a child trying to shine a flashlight on a fallen hero through a TV. Whether it was Noah or the miracle of the celestial screen, the encouragements reached Jun. But am I worthy? He asked himself, guilt still heavy. You recorded proof that I lived, Sarah said simply. Those photos, your pictures of me smiling, are proof I existed. Jun's face changed as if clouds parted. The weight in his chest began to lift. I'm glad you showed me the radiance of this world, Sarah laughed, and then slowly became transparent. Her words lingered. Radiance, not only in the beautiful things around him, but in Jun himself. I'm really glad I met you. Her body dissolved into air, leaving behind one final gift, a smile, and a word she had never said before. Thank you. Use this power to protect the people you care about most. Back in the land of finality, Mephisto had appeared, cocky and full of confidence. How can you, with no true Ultra Warrior left, be my match? He taunted. Komon, in a combined fighter jet, was furious and retaliated. Take this! The ultimate ray erupted, illuminating the land of finality like daylight. Mephisto didn't dodge. He took the beam to the chest, imitating Brother Man and trying to stand firm. Even Brother Man himself couldn't withstand such force unscathed. The strike sent Mephisto reeling. Sparks and smoke billowed from his burning torso. Ah! He screamed. When did human weapons get this strong? For a moment he tried to pretend otherwise, but then he snapped. He fired a dark beam that struck Komon's fighter, alarms blaring, smoke trailing from the tail. Komon didn't panic. He gritted his teeth and kept the plane steady, ready for another shot. As long as the jet didn't explode, he could keep fighting. Shinjo watched, fists clenched and sweating for Komon. He desperately wanted to pass some of his luck on to the ace pilot. In the conscious space, the Evoltruster's heartbeat grew clearer and its light brighter. Jun held it, no longer confused. The light was never punishment. This was the power to save lives. He had once searched for the meaning of life and thought he'd found it, then lost it. That no longer mattered. This time, he decided, voice steady in his heart, I will use the light to protect the people who matter. No shout, no raised arm, only the swift, unhesitating resolve. Crimson light enveloped Jun. In the moved, joyful gazes of countless watchers across worlds, the warrior of light returned from the land of death. Back in the land of finality, a heartbeat seemed to echo from Nexus. His chest core flashed a vivid crimson. Golden light spread from his body. The tentacles binding him fizzled and crumbled when they touched it, bursting into sparks. What? Mephisto's scorn froze into disbelief. The silver giant who should have perished knelt, then struggled and breathed. He rose again. In that desolate place, faint as it was, light returned, and with it a sense of security as strong as any Ultra Warrior's. How could this be? The light in his eyes had supposedly gone out. How could he still stand and face Mephisto? A cold anger flared in Mephisto's dark eyes. This power should have been his. He stalked toward the newly risen Nexus, furious at being wronged. The fight wasn't over. The light had chosen Jun, and Jun was no longer willing to carry his burden alone. P.S. Blazar is amazing. Even though the new Gaiden project was pulled, Gaiden is everywhere now. The Ultraman fishing episode in Episode 2 was hilarious. The defense team's portrayal is top-notch, professional yet believable. Losing a pen and later finding it with no ink is painfully realistic. I have to borrow that Tokusatsu Medusa line right away. Take off. Starting at 9.8 points. Lev for today. What a brilliant beginning. 199. Hey, where's your ultimate ray? Bring it up here. An Ultra Warrior could lose their light, lose their energy, and still breathe and stand. That was what stunned Mephisto. It was like watching someone bleed out while their heart still beat fiercely. Unlike Master Gao, who had merely pretended to go dark while secretly dreaming of two powerful allies to fuse with, Nexus was fighting now purely on Jun's will. His eyes were blank, his light gone, and yet he still held himself up, protecting life. For a human to reach that level was no less than any Ultra Warrior. In fact, many Ultras would find it impossible. Ultra awesome, one young Ultra exclaimed. From now on, I'll look for human hosts like this, so relentless. But honestly, a half-baked person like me probably isn't worthy of someone like Jun, another muttered. Growing together is what makes it precious, a third answered. Even a one-third, barely qualified human could become strong because of their human host. Are you calling someone a blockhead? Father of Ultra asked with a chuckle, looking at the group of eager young warriors. If possible, learn his spirit, he continued, more seriously. But don't think you can stand up and keep fighting after your light goes out. Not everyone can try that. For a regular person, attempting it would probably mean death. Not everyone has Taro's physique or Jun's resolve. Still, thank you. Father of Ultra's voice softened. Light is a bond. Those who are touched by it may not gain power dramatically beyond ordinary humans, but that warm, steadfast feeling imprints itself deep in the soul. More people will be filled with hope because of it. That, after all, was what Ultra Warriors had always fought for. The spectacle before them was moving, but the gloom had not lifted. Jun's renewed stand did not produce a qualitative leap in strength. It was a final burst, a desperate flare. His weakness was obvious. There were no humans left here to shine a guiding light for him. And yet, there was something more powerful than a flashlight. Mephisto, standing over Nexus, noticed right away that there was no dangerous, idealistic power erupting from him. He shouted about protection, future, hope, then charged me. I was terrified at the time, Dark Mephisto said coldly. To me, so-called power is meant to dominate others. He clenched his fist as if to take everything for himself and stalked toward Nexus, unconcerned about the weakened foe's ability to strike back. He reached out and grabbed Nexus by the throat. Nexus wrapped both hands around Mephisto's arm, straining, but despite everything he had left, he couldn't budge it. The struggle enraged Mephisto. How could you possibly win against me? he snarled, and landed a crushing blow to Nexus's dim chest. The silver giant flew backward. Before he could brace himself, Mephisto spun and kicked him in the stomach, sparks flying as the giant was hurled 100 meters away. Ugh! Nexus cried out in pain. He's not dead? Mephisto blinked in surprise. Seeing Nexus down, the Night Raiders rushed to support him. Engines 2 and 3 restored, someone called. Hypersonic energy online. Koman and Nagi Saijo coordinated the fighter with mechanical precision. Captain Wakura barked an order. Koman, where's your ultimate ray? Bring it up and fire now. Understood. Koman replied, eyes burning. He could not forgive Mephisto. Rico, Himea Jun, so many others had been slaughtered. He slammed the trigger. Mephisto, sensing something, turned his head lazily. When the familiar deep blue beam sliced through the dim sky, he raised a hand. Two torrents of energy met, a deep purple and the Ultra's blue. The purple beam intercepted and blocked the ultimate ray, as if it were nothing. It wasn't that the blue beam was weak. It was that Mephisto had lodged himself in perfect position, using his chest to absorb the hit. Mephisto made a mental note. Still useless? Shiori whispered, stunned. This was the enemy Nexus faced. Only one shot left, someone cried. Captain Wakura's frown tightened. Command center, where should the last shot hit? Staff Officer Kira's calm voice came over the line. Aim for the Ultra Warrior's energy core. Energy core? Wakura echoed, puzzled. The Night Raiders and the audience froze. The only Ultra present appeared to be Nexus. Did Kira mean they wanted to use him as a bomb? Kira explained meticulously. The ultimate ray is generated from the photoelectron matrix of an Ultra Warrior's destructive beam. If we alter the composition data, we can convert it to pure energy. So, we can charge the Ultra Warrior. But you must aim precisely. Any deviation, and it will be useless. If they missed, they'd be powering Mephisto instead of saving Nexus. Still, Kira's words lit hope across the team and among viewers. No wonder Kira had been involved when T captured Jun for photon rejuvenation earlier. As a seer, he couldn't see everything, but he'd foreseen pieces, and had arranged for Jun's data to be collected. It had been part of a plan. The hope was tempered by worry. This method must be damaging to the body, someone murmured. It's like giving a dying person a shot of adrenaline. Thankfully, Silver Nexus's core is larger than Red Nexus's, another said. Otherwise, aiming would have been impossible. Over in the land of light, Hikari listened and couldn't hide his surprise. I didn't expect Earth's tech to reach this level, he said. Kira's plan touched a threshold of life solidification technology that Hikari hadn't expected here. For Nexus, it might be enough. Brother Man remembered the SSSP, people without alien tech blessings who nonetheless solved monstrous problems with ingenuity, erasing a monster's coding with a small PS pistol, generating a makeshift specium with their own bodies. It was the scientific spirit of let's try that had gotten them this far. Back at the battlefield, the Night Raiders had the plan. Nexus was getting to his feet, but there was no time. Captain Wakura turned to Koman. Koman, the last shot is on you. Koman lifted his head, a new light in his eyes. The captain was trusting a rookie with everything. Koman took it as a charge. His heart pounded as if he'd never felt it so clearly before. You only get one chance. You can do this, right? Nagi cheered. Koman touched the amulet in his hand, picturing Riko's smile before she died. He thought of meeting Jun, of the blow like divine fists that had once saved him, the elder brother who had borne so much without asking for comfort. Himea Jun's relieved smile flashed before Koman's eyes. He wanted Jun to smile every day, to be free of sorrow. All those memories condensed into an iron resolve. Koman's eyes shone, bright and unwavering. Under the held breath of countless spectators, he pulled the trigger. Ultra Warrior, stand up, he cried. The ultimate ray surged, streaking across the sky in a bright azure line. Mephisto, who had been slowly approaching Nexus, glanced back and watched the beam sweep past him and, astonishingly, strike true. It hit the energy core. So it wasn't aimed at me, he thought, a hint of amusement curling his lips. The beam injected itself into Nexus. The impact made the already weakened giant groan and fly backward. He crashed to the ground, reached out toward the sky, and the hand that rose lost its strength and fell limp. Nexus could not get up again. The Night Raiders were stunned and outraged. Koman stared, horror-struck, feeling utterly useless. He had failed everyone, and failed the hero who had guided him. Mephisto looked down at the fallen giant, a sneer beginning to form. It was laughable to the dark giant. An Ultra revived by human light? Ridiculous. Before he could laugh, his face froze, because from the battered body of Nexus, something else had begun. A bright, pure light was emerging. 200, Crimson Lotus Meteor. He was back from the dead again. That was Mephisto's thought. The first time Nexus rose, the giant who had lost his light returned. The second time, he siphoned a huge amount of power like a living power bank. How was that possible? Golden light wrapped Nexus's whole body, constantly shifting. The energy core on his chest pulsed with crimson ripples, like a phoenix spreading its wings. Amid countless astonished gazes, Nexus's eyes shone bright again. He didn't just rise for the umpteenth time. This time felt different. I'm full of power now. It wasn't only the ultimate ray's energy, it was Jun's resolve, the Night Raider's faith, the bond between light and humanity. It was a strength to surpass everything. Scum! Nexus roared at Mephisto. Whether he was cursing him or bolstering his own courage was unclear. His hand brushed across his chest. Space rippled like water, and his mountain-like form, moving through those ripples, turned crimson. Vast energy poured off him. Now the invincible hero who protected humanity faced Dark Mephisto with unprecedented power. He stared at his enemy. Count your sins now. Good. I should have used the red form from the start, people murmured. Is this the bond between humans and Ultras? Nexus, Tiga, Max, Mebius, they all get stronger because of humans. Humans can be rotten, but some stand with the Ultra Warriors. He found the meaning of his fight, not atonement, but salvation. The joy of Nexus standing up after his light was snuffed couldn't match the joy of Jun finally breaking his inner demons and returning at his strongest. Everyone beamed, everyone except Mephisto. This situation had exceeded Gorogi's nightmares. Nexus's revival was something he never imagined. How is this possible? Your light should have been used up, he snarled. Sharp claws extended, and Mephisto swung an arm. Blood-red energy bullets laced with electricity, and dark mist shot toward Nexus. Boom, boom, boom. Nexus planted a foot and raised his hand, blocking every attack with the Nexus armament. Black and red energy scattered harmlessly. Jun's voice echoed from inside the giant, slicing through Mephisto's clamor. This power belongs to those who never give up hope. If you can't understand that, how can you possibly defeat me? Crimson dark energy pooled in the Nexus armament, and under Mephisto's horrified stare, it turned into bright azure photon energy. It rebounded toward Mephisto. Jun, who had watched light be corrupted by darkness again and again, finally felt vindicated. Boom! The land of finality lit like a brilliant blue supernova as beams of light and crimson flames erupted, swallowing Mephisto's form. The smoke cleared to reveal Mephisto on one knee, disheveled and panting. He lifted his head with a cold fury. Hope! How ridiculous! He rose, shouting at Nexus and himself both. I am invincible. I will never lose to you. Unknowingly, he'd weakened himself. Both giants surged and collided like meteors. The ground shook. Dust and waves of debris flew. The two behemoths, one of light, one of darkness, rose and fought through the sky, using the whole land of finality as their battlefield. Their speed blurred into streaks and air currents, accompanied by delayed roars. The clash, though brief, was dangerous. Mephisto realized with rising dread that he was subtly losing the upper hand. How could this be? Nexus had fallen. He had been dead, yet here he stood, suppressing Mephisto. Furious, Mephisto attacked with everything he had. This light, this power, was meant for him. Hamea Jun must die! Die! Die for me! Why won't you just die? He swung a punch. Nexus dodged, but kicked Mephisto in the gut. Mephisto tumbled backward. Before he could recover, Nexus had grabbed him by the waist and accelerated, sweeping thousands of meters through the sky. At last, Mephisto threw him off with a kick. If this continued, he'd be at a disadvantage. He needed a way to break the deadlock. For example, his dark eyes fell on Sakuda on the ground. For example, by killing Jun's confidant. Damn it, Gorogi thought, I will slaughter all lovers in the world, and I'll follow them across universes. I'll kill, kill, kill. Let them feel a black hand. Buzz, a deep purple destructive energy bullet carrying the power of death, launched toward Sakuda's position. Damn you! Hostage threats again? Viewers shouted. We need a stronger insult than Babelion. Mephisto, come to the land of light, and I'll tear off your suit. The old men wrapped in red blankets clenched their fists. The killing intent from the bracelet stand-in and the Jeep test driver rippled. Only one viewer on a distant planet, a self-proclaimed Babelian, clapped and laughed. Ha! More and more people claim kinship with our family tree. Someday, all villains across universes will be Babelians. Battle Nazar Jinchuriki Babar, Dark Emperor Babar, Babar Tartarus. Babar will be the big boss. He spammed comments and even argued with someone named Tartarus. Kingdom? What kingdom? I've only heard of the Belial Galaxy Empire. I'm on planet XX in universe XX. What, you'll fight me across universes? The next second, a golden portal opened behind him. Brother Tazi stepped out, grinning. Babar blinked. Who are you? Brother Tazi happily pointed at himself and began to introduce himself. I am. But the screen focused back on the battle. Seeing the attack was headed for Sakuda, Nexus reacted instantly. He roared, accelerated, and shattered sonic barriers as he descended. In a shock to countless onlookers, Nexus reached the ground faster than Mephisto's energy bullet. He stood in front of Sakuda. Not just to protect humanity, Jun could not watch the people he cared about get hurt again. He had finally understood. This light was not punishment, but a power to protect those he loved. Nexus spread both palms. The vast light within him formed a sky-blue barrier. Boom! The destructive bullet fragmented into countless smaller, faster shards. The portion aimed at Sakuda was fully blocked. The important person was safe. Nexus turned and gave Sakuda a gentle nod. A man becomes strong for others. He grits his teeth and endures to the end. Sakuda seemed to see Jun's smile, firm, passionate, without bitterness. Her eyes went wet. Tears welled. New domain universe. Rio thought of the young man from before. Her experiences there would remain memories, but seeing Nexus, Jun save Sakuda regardless of the cost, she couldn't help but softly sing the song Asuka had liked. No matter when or where, I only want to protect you. Tears shone at the corner of her eyes, but it wasn't sadness so much as emotion. With neither side gaining a clear advantage, the Night Raiders struck again. Fire all missiles, Captain Wakura ordered. Koman and Nagi launched a full barrage, interrupting Mephisto as he prepared a cluster of energy bullets. He swatted away the explosions and dove for Nagi Saijo's fighter jet. This ignorant woman. Gorogi's gaze was full of rage. Nagi had nowhere to go. Nagi, get out of the way, Captain Wakura shouted. Before the sentence finished, Mephisto was already in front of Nagi. Then a clear shout rang out. Nexus's speed, the same as when he'd saved Sakuda, outran Mephisto. He struck Mephisto aside and narrowly saved the fighter jet. Nagi drew a deep breath. Once again, she had been saved by the hero she had once misunderstood. Light and darkness clashed in the sky. Separated by 1,000 meters, the two giants unleashed their ultimate rays simultaneously. Azure and Crimson twisted and collided. At the energy collision center, a colossal fireball formed, blinding as the sun and still growing. The two titans paused, but the battle wasn't over. Nexus turned and met Sakuda's worried eyes, then Koman's dazed stare. He said nothing, but his gaze spoke volumes, reluctance and a farewell. Mephisto still had strength, but Jun knew that if the fight dragged on, his advantage would shrink. He had to win with one decisive blow. Everyone watched, breathless. What would he do? The blazing sun in the sky continued to erupt. Mephisto, riding the flames, gathered his ultimate attack to annihilate everyone. Nexus silently faced the surging heat and flew into it without hesitating, a crimson meteor. Could it be? Mr. Himeya? People whispered, watching the giant plunge and not return. He clenched his right fist. Under Mephisto's utterly horrified eyes, within the towering red lotus flames, amid the tearful cries of countless people, Nexus, carrying his resolve to die, punched the energy orb Dark Mephisto was charging. The scorching flames and violent energy exploded like a tsunami, engulfing them both. Mephisto screamed, and Nexus, Himeya Jun, let the terrifying tide tear him apart. In the light, he welcomed the end of his destiny. P.S. Exactly 200 chapters. Turned out well. Jun's final battle lined up with a round number, which feels fitting. There might be 2 more Easter egg chapters tied to Jun's arc, though that's only a possibility. Ren and Koman aren't planned to follow directly after Jun. Having all 3 together would be too long. Anyway, later.